Good morning, everyone. My name is Theresa O'Donnell. I want to thank you all for being here this morning, and I want to especially thank our guests from out of town who came in during some very inclement weather last night. We really appreciate you being here. We'll be joined a little later in the morning by some of our elected officials, but I just wanted to get the program started and welcome everybody to the beautiful Meyerson Symphony Hall. As many of you know, this facility was constructed about 25, 26 years ago and was the first of many architecturally significant buildings in the Arts District. These buildings not only house our wonderful, celebrated visual and performing arts, but they're also works of art themselves. And Dallas proudly boasts of having the largest contiguous arts district in the United States. So thank you for being here. April is Fair Housing Month, and it's a time for us to reflect on what we've accomplished during the previous year, and opportunities. We'll hear be inspired by some national thought leaders this morning on the subject of fair housing, not only to strengthen our commitment, but also help us further our actions in affirmatively furthering fair housing here in Dallas and in the Metroplex. Today, we've assembled a very impressive group of experts in the field of housing who will share with us some of the best practices that are happening in Texas and in the U.S. We're honored to have them with us here today. Our keynote address will be given by Gustavo Velasquez. Thank you, Mr. Assistant Secretary, for traveling to Dallas today. And introducing Mr. Velasquez will be Garry Sweeney, the Regional Director of HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. We're also excited to hear from Renee Glover of the Catalyst Group. Many of you know or familiar with Ms. Glover's work. I know I am, and her commitment to not only affordable housing, but a public service. In addition to her work at the Catalyst Group, Ms. Glover also serves as the board chair for Habitat Humanity International. She's also the past president and CEO of the Atlanta Housing Authority and the director of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. You'll hear more about her resume, but she's an extremely impressive woman and has really changed the national conversation on fair housing. Our lunch speaker, we're honored to have our mayor, Mike Rollins, will be here. And we'll finish out the day learning from Elizabeth Spencer, the Director of Housing and Neighborhood Community Development for the City of Austin. So that'll be our day. Our speakers will help us envision the possibilities for Dallas by sharing best practices from around the state and country. But we also hope they'll challenge us to focus on some of the more troubling circumstances that are in Dallas, the parts of Dallas that aren't working quite so well, so that we can ask ourselves, how can we cultivate all of Dallas? How can we further fair housing in Dallas? As we sit in this beautiful symphony hall today, we understand the prosperity of Dallas. I recently read a news report that said that Dallas, in the past 4 years, Dallas and Houston have had the most aggressive growth in new millionaires than any place in the country. Yet we know large parts of Dallas still struggle with poverty, with blight, and with fair housing. But it's not for lack of resources, right? This is a prosperous city, it's a prosperous community. We know the resources are here. And I think today, if we as a city can recognize what's important, then we can start to make the changes needed for Dallas to become an equitable and a just city for all our residents. So I thank you for being here and being a part of this work. What I'd like to do now is introduce Garry Sweeney. And before I do, I just want to, I need to recognize all of our dignitaries and officials that are here. Garry Thurman Miles, Warren Erst, our city attorney, Betsy Spencer, the director from Austin, Mary Ann Russ, and I notice we've just been joined by Shirley Sweeney, our regional community development director from HUD. As I introduce Garry, I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that the city of Dallas has been doing over the past year with the help of Garry and the HUD regional office. Many of you know, and if you don't know, I'm going to do a plug here for our Neighborhood Plus plan. that we've been working on for about the past year. We presented a draft of that plan to the City Council in February, and it received really, really good reception. And that plan really couldn't have been possible without Garry's help and some of our other Dallas partners, Habitat for Humanity, who's also here today, some of our Chodos that I've seen here today. Children's Hospital has been a great partner in this plan, ICP, DISD, and many, many more nonprofits and the philanthropic community in Dallas. If you go online and take a look at this plan, you'll see that it has 6 key strategies, but the number one key strategy, the foundation for the plan, is collective impact. We know at the City of Dallas it takes partners. It takes the real estate community. It takes the apartment community. It takes the nonprofit builders and the private sector builder and the for-profit builders to really build the type of housing that Dallas needs for all her residents. And so with that, I just want to thank Garry for all his help and his guidance over this past year and ask him to come up and introduce our Assistant Secretary.
Good morning. Well, it's great to be up on the stage finally. Last year I was there, but I spoke outside, not inside. So I told Beverly, I said, it should be nice if I could be on the stage, because I've been out there looking at all the magnificent performers over the years. So I'm actually up there. No, I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to act. I'm going to do probably a get-by performance in terms of introducing my assistant secretary. But it is great being here. It's always nice to come to Dallas. As Theresa said, we've been working closely for the last year or so on what I think is going to be a fantastic venture for the City of Dallas. And I think the City Council and other leaders should be commended for those efforts and the amount of time that they've put into it to address, the issues associated with your neighborhood, affordable housing, how to expand housing opportunities. I know many of y'all are in the audience are in the advocacy role. You assist people in finding housing. You're also the developers, the people who are developing this housing. I see Mary Ann and Russ up front there with the Housing Authority. Mary Ann's been very much involved in this process too. And I see my old supervisor, Don Babers. Don, I think did she recognize you already? I was back in the alcoves, everything. Stand up, Don, real quick. Don was back when I see Don in the audience. I always think about Don. I said, well, back in the day, Don was my supervisor back in the early '80s, and Don had this massive afro, and I had long dark hair at that time, So, but Don's an old fair housing person before he came into administration. Now he's with the City of Dallas, so it's always good to see Don. Also, I see a number of my staff people. Of all the HUD people in the audience, will they just stand up real quick? Because we've got my staff as well as I'm looking out. I see my counterpart Shirley Henley, who is the director of the Community Planning and Development Office, and Kelly Haynes. I always come to call you Kathy, Kelly. Kelly Haynes, who is the director of the Office of Multifamily Housing, which for the developers in the audience, she's the person where everything flows through in terms of all the insured deals and a lot of the tax credit deals that have HUD insurance. So thank y'all for being supportive of this conference. It is my pleasure today, we're a little bit ahead on the agenda, it's my pleasure to introduce my boss. He flew in, and I think, knowing Texas weather, he actually did fly in last night. His flight was supposed to arrive around 7. I think he got here about midnight. So my boss, Mr. Gustavo Velasquez, he's the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. This office is the part of HUD that is responsible for enforcing the Federal Fair Housing Act, as well as to assure compliance of our many HUD programs with the different civil rights statutes. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of '64, Section 504 of the Rehab Act of '73 being 2 of them. He also is responsible for leading us in our what we've referred to as our firmly furthering posture. And this is where we, as a HUD, we are basically instructed to conduct our programs, HUD programs, in a way to firmly further the Fair Housing Act. And that means basically identify impediments to fair housing choice in communities, work with the communities to attempt to, to address those impediments. Prior to joining HUD, Gustavo was the executive director of the Latino Economic Development Center, which is a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit, whose purpose is to provide assistance to financial assistance as well as technical assistance to the Latino business community. They advocate not only for the business opportunities, but also for helping these communities to secure accessible housing. Prior to that, he was the director of the D.C. Office of Human Rights, which is basically equivalent to what the city of Dallas had in terms of the Dallas Fair Housing Offices. He was responsible for not only the fair housing ordinances within the city of, within Washington, D.C., but also public accommodations, employment, everything that virtually affects persons in terms of their securing civil rights in that community. He's also served as the pardon me, I'm losing my notes. He also has been on several numerous boards and advisory groups. He's a very active civil rights person. I think once you hear him speak, you'll know that he has a keen commitment towards civil rights, affordable housing, helping persons to pull themselves up from, by their bootstraps up, helping them to do it themselves, not to provide it for them, but helping them to secure those necessary skills, the employment opportunities, the economic opportunities, the housing opportunities to do that. Gustavo attended the University of Pennsylvania, got his master's in government affairs. He's married. I've not met his wife or his kids. I know he is a very, very family-oriented guy, and during Fair Housing Month, he's away from that family quite a bit. So I know this is something he's going to be happy to kind of put his feet back on the ground. But with that said, I would like to have everybody give Gustavo a very warm Texas welcome. Gustavo?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Garry, for that generous introduction. Garry does a great work here. He covers a big region in Texas and surrounding states, and despite very limited staff and resources, he is able to maintain a good running shop for fair housing here in Region 6. So let's give him another hand to Garry. Where did you go, Garry? Great. Great. It is a pleasure to be here today. Yes, like Garry said, I've been traveling all over the United States during Fair Housing Month. Happy Fair Housing Month, by the way. It is great, however, to be here. I truly was hoping at the beginning of the month for Dallas to put something together. It was one of the places that I was very much looking forward to be during Fair Housing Month, and I'll elaborate why during my remarks. But I know people have been acknowledged. However, I just want to take a minute to recognize, I know Mayor Rawlings is not here, but I think that he was going to be here later today, so I want to thank him for taking time of his schedule to be present during a fair housing event. That is means a lot to me and obviously to all of you. Councilperson Carolyn Davis, who chairs the Housing Committee, Scott Griggs, who is the Vice Chairperson. I don't know if they're here, but I just wanted to recognize them. A.C. Gonzalez, the City Manager. I don't know if he's arrived or not, but he's a great guy. I had a chance to meet him a couple months ago. Loves his city, very dedicated to running Dallas, despite being such a big and complex city. And Warren, I know Warren is there. Warren, the city attorney, thank you for being here. Very helpful, Warren, in everything you've done. I also want to recognize, I didn't see you earlier, Betsy, but now I see you. It's great to give Betsy Julian a big hand. We know. president of the Inclusive Communities Program, I don't have to tell you, I'm sorry, Betsy, I'm going to take a few minutes to say how significant Betsy has been in advancing fair housing in inclusive cities across the country, especially here in Dallas, a place that she cares so much about and wants it to succeed when it comes to integrated neighborhoods. And in particular, the work that she and her group are done with respect to the low-income housing tax credit program. You all know the tax credit program was created as a way to develop distressed areas. And the program, I don't have to tell you, is the primary vehicle by far today for the creation of affordable housing. But while using the tax credit can be positive, there shouldn't be use. They shouldn't be used to build housing in racially concentrated areas where there is little opportunity. We need to build affordable housing in areas of higher opportunity. And Betsy has been at the forefront of that challenge, so we appreciate that and the work of her group. Beverly Davis, who is our director, our assistant director for Fair Housing and Human Rights. Beverly, thank you for the invitation. This is our FAB agency, Fair Housing Assistance Program. We fund many of these local, state and local government agencies whose laws are substantially equivalent to the Fair Housing Act. And it's great that Dallas is that case. And I don't know if we have members of Texas Apples here. I just want to give some names of organizations that work very, very closely with HUD on fair housing: Texas Appleseed, the Texas Organizing Project, and the Texas Low-Income Housing Information Services. Anybody from those groups here? I know that they were expected. This year, the nation celebrates 47 years of the passage of this landmark civil rights legislation. This law makes it, as you all know, unlawful, and has made it for 47 years unlawful to discriminate in all types of housing transaction, public, private market, rental, sales, financing, on the basis of a number of characteristics. As we close out another Fair Housing Month, I want to take a few minutes to share with you some of the most significant trends in fair housing across the country. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, for those who've been working for so many years in protecting, defending civil rights, let me start by saying that these last few years have been particularly challenging. Now, we have had some advances. I would say, when you look at areas such as equal pay, marriage equality, the fundamental right to affordable health care, there are some areas of progress that we have to acknowledge. But we've also been witnessing some setbacks. Issues like the right to vote, issues like affirmative action, chronic ailments that still persist in our communities, such as police misconduct and criminal injustice. These are issues that we continue to suffer. In housing, we are living a very serious rental affordability crisis, and the availability of affordable and assisted housing is critically low, even in economically thriving cities as Dallas is. In particular, there have been issues involving the extent to which the city of Dallas was integrated and where low-income housing has been sited. This is something that we've been looking at. We care deeply about Dallas and the Dallas region as an opportunity to see progress moving in the right direction. I'm happy to say that we are beginning to see progress. Last November, HUD entered into a voluntary compliance agreement with the city that resolved what we found when we took a look at the city's affordable housing practices. Under the agreement, the city will continue with its Inspire Dallas, now commonly referred to as Neighborhood Plus plan, and develop an organized plan for the city that will provide quality, affordable, and assisted housing and all necessary supportive services in new areas of high opportunity. I mentioned that earlier, developing affordable housing in high opportunity areas while improving conditions in communities where affordable housing and assisted housing opportunities already exist. It is important, this balanced approach, this dual approach of providing people the opportunity to move to high opportunity areas and at the same time invest in communities of despair, in communities that have lived the legacy of segregation and are concentrated areas of poverty where we know there is little opportunity. We're living in a century of cities. People have loved back, again, fallen back in love with cities again, which is a very positive trend. We who live at the urban core, we know that this is happening with cities across the country, and it's a very positive trend. Yet in many cities, the influx of people, particularly higher earning, more affluent individuals, has caused rents to rise, pricing many lower income families out of the market. At HUD, we believe that cities should be for everyone. We at HUD, the mission of HUD, is not just to build housing, it's to build communities. We want to make sure that, again, the urban core is a place for everyone. We want to see all parts of our city come back to life, including low-income minority concentrated areas, and that requires the investments that I was referring to. So I was pleased to hear the city leaders have adopted Neighborhood Plus as a mechanism to transforming city neighborhoods into thriving communities. The agreement between HUD and Dallas also directs the city to consider adoption of an ordinance prohibiting source of income discrimination, which presents itself primarily in the form of discrimination in housing against persons or families who have housing choice vouchers. We believe this is the right step as well. The city of Austin adopted such an ordinance last year, and after successfully prevailing in federal court, is in the process of implementing it. I understand, possibly in response to the Austin ordinance, that the Texas legislature is currently considering state action to prohibit adoption of future ordinances by Texas municipalities. I want to take this opportunity to ask the City of Dallas officials and others to oppose the pending state action because of the chilling effect it would have on the ability of low-income persons to secure housing in areas of opportunity. For many low-income individuals and families, the House Choice Voucher Program is the only way they can obtain affordable, quality housing. So limiting the housing options of voucher holders denies housing to those who need it the most. More important, we believe this obviously goes against the intent of the Dallas agreement that we signed recently. The agreement is the right steps, and I commend the city on the progress it has made during the past 5 months, and I am confident and very much look forward that this progress will continue, and we will certainly be working with the city in our monitoring role to make sure that that happens. Now, as the nation moves further into this 21st century, I believe that we can take Fair Housing Month as an opportunity to reinvigorate, to recommit to the strong power of the Fair Housing Act, and to make sure that we settle once and for all that basic covenant that we have in our country, that everyone is free to choose where they live without regard to who we are, how we look, how we speak, or who we love. Secretary Julian Castro, a favorite son of this great state, has a vision as the Secretary of HUD of an America where we level the playing field for everyone. This is part of his vision for a good reason. Today, still, well into the 21st century, someone in our country is still denied the opportunity to have a hymn of his or her own choosing. For us to realize the vision of leveling the playing field and further advance freedom of choice in housing, again, I ask you to join forces and let's recommit as part of this Fair Housing Month to inclusion and equal opportunity in housing. Now, you probably say, well, how do we accomplish that? That is a major task. One of the ways is through affirmatively furthering fair housing. We are proposing a planning framework that is overdue, that we have not provided in an effective way to communities across the country that will make it easier, not harder as our critics have claimed, but easier for cities, states, public housing authorities to meet this important legal obligation under the Fair Housing Act to affirmatively advance the national policy of fair housing. See, in 1968, when Congress passed the Fair Housing Act into law, it did so not just to provide redress and justice for people who were being discriminated right then. It also passed this law to make sure that local communities would take proactive or affirmative steps to combat and eventually eradicate segregation that was happening for decades in so many places. Congress wrote into law 47 years ago the legal mandate to affirmatively open communities to housing choice. So it was about time that the federal government provides guidance, provides this planning framework that comes not just as a planning document, but comes with data for local communities to assess the conditions that neighborhoods have. And many other aspects that I won't go into detail, but this planning framework, I just want to emphasize, it doesn't have, as our critics claim, this gotcha mentality, but instead supports local communities so that on their own, you can effectively assess the opportunities you have to proactively eliminate barriers to housing choice and set a plan in place that goes along with the overarching investments infrastructure plan that you have in your city. So making sure that fair housing is incorporated in all of this, in the overarching plan that you have for investments and infrastructure. No one knows the challenges that the city of Dallas is grappling with better than the people in this room today. Not me, not my friends, the bureaucrats in Washington, but you. So that is what this planning framework enabled you to do. We have been fortunate to have the civil rights community, many groups across the country, supporting this proposed regulation, this proposed planning framework. And I believe that you can play a role once we are able to roll this out so that we engage the community so that they participate, intricately participants in the process of planning that you will undertake as part of affirmatively furthering fair housing efforts. Now, this work of affirmatively furthering fair housing can certainly bring about transformational outcomes in our country, but there are many other areas that reflect the impact of the work that we do in fair housing. Work that we don't do alone, never at HUD, but in concert with hundreds of fair housing, legal aid organizations, FAP agencies, like here in Dallas. Just so you know, in the last couple of years, HUD, in this area of enforcement, has provided relief, has obtained more than $420 million of relief in compensation for victims of housing discrimination. This has been a dramatic increase over the 2-year prior. This is hard work. It sounds simple, but the work of fair housing enforcement is extremely time-consuming, labor-intensive. It is one individual, one family, one case at a time. This reminds me the story of the stranded starfish. I don't know if you heard that story. It's a great story, so I'll tell you. One morning, there's this woman walking on the beach. It's very early in the morning, and as she's walking on the beach, she sees a man far away that is leaning down and then standing up and putting his arms towards the ocean. So as she gets closer and closer, she sees that the beach is covered with stranded starfish, just covered. And she approaches the man, and she sees that the man is actually picking up a starfish and throwing it into the sea. She gets closer and she says, "Excuse me, sir, look around you. You have hundreds, thousands, maybe 1 million of stranded starfish. I can see them as far as I can see on the beach. What difference can you possibly make with so many of this here?" So he picks another one, throws it into the ocean, turns to her and says, "It made a difference to that one. It made a difference to that one." So that is, when we think of fair housing enforcement, the investigation of cases is really one individual, one family, one case at a time. Now, in addition to maximizing relief for individual victims, HUD has emphasized its secretary-initiated authority. We have the authority, on behalf of the secretary, to file complaints of housing discrimination when we don't have anybody that steps forward claiming that they've been aggrieved. Using this authority, we were able to investigate allegations, for example, that in Norfolk, Virginia, an area property management company had a policy of refusing to rent to persons with limited English. We initiated this secretary-initiated action in this instance. In Nashville, Tennessee, we reached a settlement resolving allegations that the owner and managers of an apartment complex discriminated against Hispanic residents when they terminated leases, ignored maintenance requests, and engaged in acts of intimidation and harassment based on national origin in an attempt to make them leave. In the first case, we settled for nearly $83,000, and in the second, for $180,000. We also used our secretary-initiated authority to discover when mortgage lenders were requiring borrowers with disability-related income, to jump through additional hoops in order to secure a loan. The department reached a settlement agreement with Bank of America and Fannie Mae after allegations that this lender and Fannie Mae violated the Fair Housing Act by denying a borrower's application to modify her mortgage loan because she did not provide sufficient information about the nature of her disability. You can't do that. In another disability discrimination settlement, HUD reached a $90,000 agreement with Coldwell Banker and the seller of a house in Massachusetts, settling allegations that one of the mortgage company's agents and the seller violated, again, the Fair Housing Act by preventing the sale of a house that was going to be used as a group home for persons with disabilities. Another common issue, unfortunately, that we see from time to time. We're also increasing our impact by investigating policies and practices that systemically discriminate against groups of people protected by the law, like blacks or Hispanics, when we see a questionable pattern that may lead to an exclusion of them. From 2012 to the present, we have seen an increase in this number of systemic complaints, from close to 200 back then to 325 as of last week. HUD has taken aggressive steps to combat systemic lending discrimination in recent years. These aren't actions we're taking for the sake of increasing our enforcement efforts. These are actions we're taking because homeownership is the anchor that provides the stability families need to create better lives. In one case, Mortgage IT paid $12.1 million to resolve allegations that this specific lender discriminated against blacks and Hispanic borrowers seeking mortgage loans during the lead up to the housing crisis by denying loans at higher rates and charging borrowers of color higher fees than similarly situated white borrowers. Just a few months ago, we negotiated an agreement with Midland States Banker, resolving allegations that the bank just outright avoided doing business in predominantly black and Hispanic neighborhoods in St. Louis and Northern Illinois. This redlining case settled for $8 million in mortgage loans, and now they have to provide to majority minority neighborhoods and open full-service branches in these regions. So when it comes to enforcing the Fair Housing Act in the area of mortgage lending or financing, this is extremely important as we are slowly but steadily coming back from one of the worst real estate crises in decades. A few years back, remember, many of us were talking about predatory lending, vast predatory underwriting out there in many communities of minority concentration. Minorities were, no doubt about, the target of this predatory, different types of predatory lending. Then what happened? 2007, 2008, the bubble burst. And now we've seen very, very restrictive markets. So basically the pendulum swung from one side to the other, where blacks and Hispanics are now at a 14-year low in their ability to secure a mortgage. And these are the communities that we have seen their values completely, in many neighborhoods, wiped out. So when we talk about fair housing and home lending, we're talking not just about fighting discrimination. We're talking about helping our economy recover. We're talking about making the country stronger by giving the opportunity that everybody has. Again, creditworthiness should just be the factor. The opportunity that once you are entitled to a credit, everybody has to own a home and create wealth. This is why at HUD, we're working very diligently to expand credit access in communities that would not otherwise obtain. One way to do that, and Secretary Castro has been traveling a lot and making the case for more credit access to FHA-insured mortgages. We're looking also forward to working with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mae through our fair lending oversight that we have to expand more credit access in the secondary market. Coming back to cases, let me remind everybody that the highest number of complaints that we receive continues to be discrimination, alleged discrimination on the basis of disability. 53% of all complaints filed in the United States now are complaints on the basis of disability discrimination. And this will continue as our population continues to age. Over the last couple of years, we have published guidance on how to provide integrated housing opportunities for persons with disabilities in accordance with Olmstead, and we have issued guidance with respect to service animals. Despite this guidance, I'm afraid we continue to receive complaints that support animals are often excluded. Not long ago, HUD reached a settlement with Kent State University in Ohio, resolving allegations that the university denied the student with disability his right to keep a support animal. And even as our nation is more multicultural than ever before, and I don't have to tell you this, you live here in Dallas, very multicultural place. Discrimination based on national origin remains a problem. And we've made some progress here as well. After HUD found that the state of Nebraska, for example, was failing to ensure that persons with limited English were able to access benefits from HUD-assisted programs, the state signed an agreement with HUD resolving these allegations of non-compliance. I call upon all of you who work with new immigrant communities, especially those new immigrants with severe language barriers, to continue to help us spread the message about these individuals' fair housing rights regardless of their immigration status, and to bring information about discrimination against them to HUD. We must recognize and respect that the very fabric of our nation is the rich diversity of our people. I also want to highlight our efforts to uncover and stop situations where women are the target of housing discrimination. This is going to shock you, but it's true. We have taken the lead on discrimination against women who were denied mortgage loans because they are pregnant or on maternity leave. Just last October, we reached a $5 million settlement with Wells Fargo, resolving allegations that the lender discriminated against several women who were pregnant or had recently been given birth. One of the couples in that case lives in Jarrell, Texas. The couple filed a complaint after being told by Wells Fargo employees that some people don't return to work after the birth of a little one, and that they could not close until the mother returned to work, notwithstanding the fact that she was receiving temporary leave pay and had provided information that she intended to return to work. The seller in the same transaction also filed a complaint because he was impacted by the delayed closing that resulted from the bank's discriminatory practices. These complaints received monetary settlement as part of a $165,000 settlement that was distributed to 6 families. The fact of the matter is that since 2010, the number of maternity leave cases in lending has steadily increased. We're at 130 now, of which we've settled 53 for a total of nearly $7 million in relief. And we've taken action in several recent cases involving sexual harassment. Last October, HUD charged landlords in West Virginia and Tennessee with sexually harassing female tenants and threatening them with homelessness if they did not comply. Let me just say, in the West Virginia case, a management company and 3 former employees that managed an apartment complex were charged after allegedly sexually harassing at least 5 women who lived there. In one instance, the manager used his keys to break into a tenant's apartment and demand that she have sex with him or lose her home and her voucher. With her children sleeping in the apartment, the woman felt that she could not refuse. Here's a woman, folks, who had subject herself to the ultimate degradation and humiliation just to keep a roof over her children's heads. No woman should have to endure sexual harassment in order to keep her home. Both of these cases now are with the Department of Justice. And while enforcement is a vital component of addressing harassment, not just sexual harassment, but all types of harassment, we also recognize the importance of guidance in this subject. I tell you, we don't have guidance, we don't have regulation to codify the standards of harassment under the Fair Housing Act. I am committed. It's going to be a difficult task, but I am committed to use the authority that I have under Assistant Secretary to have by the end of the Obama administration finally a regulation that sets the standard, that codifies the standards that currently exist to address harassment, and particularly sexual harassment in the housing space. Also, in the area of domestic violence and domestic abuse, we have seen tragic cases against women who are threatened with the loss, with losing their homes because they are in abusive situations. We're investigating these cases on their sex or familial status, but we're also working collaboratively with the Justice Department and others to protect housing rights under VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act. I think this is a very good combination, the use of the Fair Housing Act and VAWA in situations when women are suffering from domestic violence in housing. Recently, we charged a case in Maryland and settled another in Pennsylvania. In the Maryland case, our investigation found that the woman was served with an eviction notice because the police were called after she and her son were violently stabbed by her then boyfriend. The case is also now with the Department of Justice. And 2 months ago, we reached a similar agreement with the city of Berlin, New Hampshire, settling allegations that the city had enacted an ordinance requiring landlords to evict tenants cited 3 or more times for disorderly action. By the way, these calls were calls to the police because they were being abused. Under that settlement, the city amended its ordinance to make it clear that the ordinance is not to be used against victims of reported incidents of domestic violence, and we have taken also other jurisdictions where they have just repealed altogether these ordinances. Finally, HUD is continuing its efforts to address discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. As you may know, in February of 2012, HUD published a final rule which ensures that housing that is assisted by HUD or subject to an FHA-insured mortgage be made available without regard to actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity. In February, we released additional guidance under the Equal Access Rule on how to best provide shelter to transgender persons in single-sex shelter or other facilities. And to better understand the nature and extent of housing discrimination against same-sex couples, HUD commissioned a nationwide study. The study found that same-sex couples experience adverse treatment more often than heterosexual couples when responding to internet advertisements for rental units, and that gay male couples were more likely to receive adverse treatment than lesbian couples. There's a lot of information, but I want to end my remarks today with a plea for your help, something that I've been talking to many audiences during Fair Housing Month, some kind of a call to action, for lack of a better term. I often speak about the power of partnerships, right? Combating the kinds of housing challenges I've described today can only be accomplished when people that represent local government, industry, developers, and advocates come together around common causes. If history has shown us nothing else, it has shown us that the great talent can overcome great problems. One of the great masterpieces of classical music in Handel's Messiah. Individuals have marveled at its beauty for nearly 250 years, and yet Handel composed this masterpiece 5 years after he had suffered a life-threatening heart attack. Picasso didn't have health problems, but early in his career he had serious money problems. When he was young, an unknown painter, struggling to meet ends meet, he often was forced to burn his own paintings in the fireplace in order to keep warm. Mozart struggled to make ends meet early in his career. Also, at one point, he was so poor that he couldn't even afford to buy wood to heat the shabby little room where he lived. During the winter, he wrapped his hands in wooden socks as he composed the music that would make him great. Each of these individuals confronted tremendous walls of adversity, but they found a way over and through those walls. As a result, they had made major contributions to humanity. Now, I spoke earlier about affirmatively furthering fair housing. We hope we have a regulation very soon. It has been widely criticized, as you know, has been the subject of many discussions. Now, no matter what we call it, whether it's affirmatively furthering fair housing planning, planning with the fair housing lenses, it has the potential to transform our neighborhoods. And this is going to be very, very critical here in Dallas. Now, when it comes to fair housing planning, it's everyone's work. It's not just the government's work. We are going to need a lot of public engagement, public mobilization, and participation, particularly by those groups who often don't have a voice, so that no community is left out of the goals that states, cities, and towns will set for meeting their obligation to create equal housing opportunities. Those of you here today can help in making public participation as inclusive as it can be. Cities and local counties and governments working together to develop strategies that best address the challenges they face can be extremely productive as they look for better and more efficient ways to provide this much-needed source of affordable housing. And finally, we must continue our emphasis on education. We must continue to raise awareness of the importance of cities and housing providers meeting their civil rights obligations and the rights that families and individuals are entitled to. It is difficult for any municipality to meet their compliance obligations if they don't know what those are or what's expected of them. So we are committed to increasing our efforts with your help to train and educate them so that they are more aware of federal law and can take proactive steps to meet their obligations. And because examples of the correct way to comply with federal laws are excellent teaching tools, we will look towards providing cities best practices that demonstrate how housing providers can prevent engaging in discriminatory practices. Together, I believe that we can help cities get it right. I believe that together we can help all communities across the country meet their obligations to comply with critical protections under fair housing and civil rights laws. Let me just say, and this will be my final words, a personal story is, I'm a runner. I'm a long-distance runner. I love to run. I've lived in DC for about 12, 13 years now. So I use the National Mall, for those who have been there, the National Mall as a great running path. And in that period of time, I've been fortunate to see built many beautiful landmarks there on the National Mall. I saw the final construction of the Native American Museum, followed by the landmark, beautiful, now new Dr. King Memorial. I don't know if you visit the new Martin Luther King Memorial. The new African American History Museum will be opening soon. It's almost finished. I hear that there are plans to break ground on a new Hispanic American Museum also in the nation's capital. So for all this time, as far as I remember running in that beautiful place, I've come to appreciate this place in our nation's capital, not just as a running path or a congregation, place of congregation for millions, or quite frankly, one of the most beautiful landmarks that we have in our country. I've also come to admire this place as a place for inspiration of who we are and what we have become, a place where everyone, absolutely everyone, over the years have been able to make a place, a corner, a niche, a space to build one's journey towards inclusion and prosperity. We've made a lot of progress. President Obama mentioned that during the celebration of the 50th anniversary on the March on Selma. He spoke clearly, vividly about all the progress that we've made. And that is thanks to people that keep fighting the good fight, people like you in this beautiful place, by the way, thanks to people who are committed to defending and protecting our most valuable rights, including one of those to equal and inclusive housing for all in our country. Let's not forget that, and let's keep fighting this good fight that we are engaged in the Dallas region. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you so much. What a great way to start off the day. I think we have time for just a couple of questions, and then we're going to take a short break before we hear from Ms. Glover. And so does anybody have a question? Okay, there's a mic right here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing. Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. We do have barriers. I think that's one of the reasons. I think so. One of the things that we've been working on for the past year, I mentioned it briefly with the help of Mr. Sweeney and Shirley Henley and ICP and Don Babers and Mercedes Marquez, has been working on what started out to be a housing plan for the city of Dallas. We took a little bit different approach because the planning department was actually in the lead of of this plan, not the housing department. We tasked the planning department with putting this plan together. And the housing plan expanded very quickly under Don Baber's leadership and Mercedes' leadership to become a neighborhood revitalization strategy. Because as the secretary was saying, you know, you have to address the whole community. It's not just a matter of constructing units. And in Dallas, we needed to be constructing units in right places. We'd been constructing an over dependence on area of town that already received concentrations of poverty. And we looked, so we wanted to look at that. We wanted to look at how we not only site new housing in areas of high opportunity, but also how we restore and rebuild neighborhoods that have been historically that received a lot of disinvestment and decline. And so the plan that we put forward to the council in February addresses all of Dallas. It has a number of strategies that look at blight and poverty and bringing new market product into areas of town that there has been market failure for a long, long time. And so we've really, that we kind of took it from a housing plan to a neighborhood revitalization study plan to something now that will be, that is really a strategic service delivery based on neighborhood geography. So really how we can change these neighborhoods, not just City of Dallas, but also working with the Housing Authority, working with the school district, working with hospitals and healthcare agencies, so that we build whole neighborhoods, that we build neighborhoods that work, that will attract people back from the suburbs back into the City of Dallas. And we think that's the right approach. So have there been impediments? Absolutely. And what we've done in that plan is identify those impediments and propose some strategies that we think will overcome them. And what I'll do is I'll get some information to put up on the board after our break about where you can access that draft plan on our website, and you can read through it yourself. We are prepared to take the final draft of that plan back to the City Council in May for adoption.
Can I just say
Yes, please do.
The one thing I will add is community opposition, zoning. Those are examples that you're often face in more affluent neighborhoods. For local leaders, for government officials in these communities, that I know that is hard work, but those are not excuses to do what is right. And there are really best practices out there of how communities who've been highly gentrified cities. Again, I mentioned during my remarks about how people, continue to just move back to these cities, and those are typically more affluent persons. That is a great pressure on local leaders and government officials to preserve affordable housing. But those are not excuses to not doing the right thing in terms of complying with efforts to make sure that we have communities of choice and fair housing in all communities, whether it's affluent or not affluent.
Other questions? Daryl?
Thank you. For years, I've been hearing this regional fair share plan, and I've never heard any details about it. And the basic question is, what is the priority for HUD at the Council of Government levels? Because my perception is that Dallas itself has done a very good job of providing opportunities in Dallas city limits, but the problem seems to be a regional problem. And I don't see this as a priority at the Council of Government level. So what is HUD doing to engage the councils of government so that you don't have basically a poor urban core and a rich suburban ring around the core?
Well, I want to answer that for HUD. Garry, you can certainly come down, but both Garry and Marianne and I have been to COG and talked to the executive director. And one of our commitments to HUD, and one of the things that I'm excited about in our VCA, is this idea of beginning this regional dialogue, this regional conversation. Mr. Babers has gone with us. We've had some good discussions with the executive director, Mike Eastland. We're planning to have an additional symposium like this in the fall, where we're going to ask Mayor Rollins to engage the other mayors in the Metroplex to start to really talk about this. And as I was walking around this morning having coffee and fruit, I noticed that we do have people from some of the other housing authorities in some of the suburban communities, and I'm excited to hear them talk about that today, because it isn't a Dallas problem. It's a problem for, well, I shouldn't say a problem. It's, you know, it's an issue for the entire region to deal with. One of the things that we found out in our research during the Inspire Dallas plan was that so many people who are locked in housing in the southern sector are traveling very great distances to work in the northern sector, the more prosperous areas of town. And transportation costs and transportation delays are such a big part of this affordable housing question. It's really, how can we get areas, housing in areas of high opportunity near some of those good jobs. We recently had a very small snowstorm, not like in Washington, D.C., and the city was shut down for about a day. And DART was, our mass transit was running on Saturday schedules, and the light rail didn't run at all. And so folks who did not have a reliable means of transportation and maybe had those jobs in the north, they weren't able to get there. And so I think one of the things that we also have to look at in this housing equation is transportation, access to health care, access to good education. Any other questions? So why don't we take a short break, and then we'll come back and hear from Ms. Glover. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a real hard time. Come on down. Oh, congratulations. Sure. That's great. Yes, and I think access to credit was one of the things that the Assistant Secretary spoke so eloquently about today. And in addition to all their very inspiring work in defending fair housing rights. So let's thank the Secretary for being here in Dallas today. We'll take a short break. Welcome back. Thanks everyone for coming back. If you'll take your seats, we're going to have a welcome by the Mayor Pro Tem, Monica Alonso, here to welcome you to Deputy Mayor, she corrected me, excuse me, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Monica Alonso, who would just like to welcome everyone to the Meyerson. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Did everybody have coffee or we need tequila? No, just kidding. Look at y'all. Hey, wake you up. Good morning, muy buenos días, and welcome everybody. Welcome to one of the many great facilities that we have in the city of Dallas. But importantly as well is this symposium. And first of all, we're appreciative that you're here. Second, we welcome any questions or concerns that you have. And we also welcome if we're doing a great job, which I know y'all are going to tell us. So we appreciate that. My name is Monica Alonso. Aside from being the Deputy Mayor for the City of Dallas, I also represent District 6. And if you're not familiar with District 6 in the City of Dallas, it's West Dallas, Northwest Dallas, Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge, Asian Trade Center, no? Oh, Asian Trade District, anybody? Oh, okay. Well, you'll learn more about District 6 because it's booming. It's a great place to live other than anywhere in the city of Dallas, and you don't live in the city of Dallas, consider it very highly because it's the best city you could ever live at. And even if you don't live in the city of Dallas, make sure that when you're here, you spend all your money before you leave, okay? So thank you very much. Hope that you enjoy it, and we also want to get your comments to improve and be able to provide as much information as you need for us to work together to provide a great quality of life for our constituency. Muchísimas gracias, buen día y que se la pasen bien. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alonso. Also joining me on stage this morning is Mercedes Marquez. I want to just introduce her very briefly. Mercedes has been working with us over the last year and a half and has really, with Don, been the thought leader on this new plan. She is a relentless advocate for just and equitable cities, and she's served as a personal mentor to me, and I really appreciate her being here with us today, and thank you so very much. We wouldn't have made nearly the progress that we've made in the last year without her leadership, and she's just an invaluable resource to us. And now we're very excited to hear from Renee Glover. This is a woman who I've followed her career for a long time. She is an inspiring and purpose-driven business leader and public servant, and known for changing the national dialogue, the national conversation about public housing and economic development. She sponsors public-private partnership to address multi-generational poverty and to reconnect families living in assisted housing with the larger communities, the things that we really want to move towards in Dallas today. In so doing, she's created value by leveraging the multiple limited public funding to garner private investment for neighborhood redevelopment, something that's a goal for us, and linking the needs of public and other affordable housing with the assets of real estate and finance. That sounds easy when you say it fast, but boy, that's something that's really challenging to do. She's an advocate for social justice and universal humanity, helping to lead the global movement to restore economic and social opportunity to the poor and disadvantaged. She's the current board chair of Habitat for Humanity International, engaging coalitions, building understanding, and enabling the impact on the global scale. This lady has a professional resume like nothing I've ever seen before. In addition to being the chair of the board of directors for Habitat, she is also the president and chief operating officer for chief executive officer for the Atlantic Housing Authority from '94 into 2013. She's been a member of several prominent law firms in the state. She is a Juris Doctor from Boston University, a Master's of Arts Political Science from Yale University. She's been an author and the recipient of many very prestigious awards, and I'm very happy to have her share with us today about best practices in affordable housing. So with that.
Well, good morning. I don't think I can do as good a job as the deputy mayor in getting it all said and done and kept the attention of the crowd. So you have laid down a marker. I wanted to say I'm very pleased to be here because these are very important conversations, and we have to make progress because literally, the fate of our country is at stake. I want to acknowledge, I think he's left, Gustavo Velasquez. I think he did a wonderful job in framing the whole fair housing challenge and what the Obama administration is doing to advance those issues. And so I just want to recognize and applaud him in his absence and thank him. I also spoke very quickly with Betsy Julian. Now, this either shows that you've been at something for a very long time, or you just know a lot of people. But when we first started our transformation of public housing right in 1995, we had to speak with Betsy when she was, at the time, the Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing. And because of her willingness to hear us out and work with us, we had to get something changed around site-based waiting list so that, in fact, families could choose where they wanted to live rather than being directed to. That opened up a whole new set of possibilities in terms of our whole development effort. So, you know, there are people in public office that make courageous decisions, and I think we take them for granted. And to change a body of law and statutes and stuff that's been around for decades so that progress can be made, that needs to be celebrated rather than, you know, criticized. And so Betsy is one of those public servants, along with Secretary Cisneros, who made so many incredibly wonderful changes in order for this work to move forward. I also want to recognize my colleague in arms and Marianne Russ, who's heading up the Dallas Housing Authority. These are tough jobs, folks. They really are. And I think Marianne and so many of her colleagues go underappreciated because you're on the front line and you're always making a whole array of decisions in a very political context and in a context that's often misunderstood. So, Marianne, thank you for your work and your leadership. And I've just chatted briefly with Theresa O'Connell, and just a breath of fresh air, doing a lot of wonderful work here in Dallas and in this region, and it will make a difference. And then, of course, to my dear friend Mercedes Marquez, who we worked together over the years. She is indeed a thought leader, and you are very, very privileged that she's stayed with it and that she's working with you here in Dallas. So I did want to take a minute to recognize those wonderful human beings who work, not because the work is something that you'll go home and people will say thank you. It's because the work makes a difference and it's important. And it's important to have people who are willing to put it on the line to make a difference. So I want to tell you a little bit about my personal background, because I think that if you zoom back just for a moment about this work, this is really about building communities. This is not about units. It's not about housing construction. It really is about building great communities. And as a result, it's about building great cities and ultimately a great society. And so if you put it in that kind of perspective, you have to appreciate that all of these activities happen in the context of history, sociology, and the general economy. And you have to remember that this work is community building work, nation building work, is really a journey and not a destination. And if you keep that in context and perspective, then one, you recognize how important it is, and secondly, that it's going to take time and it's going to take compromise. So I often think about my great-great-grandfather, Abraham Lincoln Lewis, who in 1901 in Jacksonville, Florida, founded the first life insurance company in the state of Florida, black or white. And I think about that, and I say, you know, some of the things that we struggle with today, quite frankly, pale in comparison, because can you imagine what that looked like in the very deep South, okay, during the era where segregation was the law, that he was able to get that done. Now, it was done in response to a need. It was the old burial insurance policies where there were burial costs, and so that was the genesis of a wonderful run. The company lasted for over 100 years and made a tremendous difference in so many lives. And so my great-great-granddad is sort of my personal hero, because whenever I'm thinking I'm having a tough day, I think about, well, what in the world did he face? And he did a lot of wonderful things and made a difference in the lives of thousands of people. And as a result, that work also helped as the civil rights movement unfolded, because it underscored that each and every human being has unlimited human potential. And if we can get to understanding the universal humanity of our fellow men and women, I think we'll be able to get over some of these things, because the battles that we fight are often around the differences in human beings. These are not substantive differences. These are things that relate to race, class, religion, sexual orientation, culture, I mean, you name it. And we take each and every difference, and rather than embracing it and appreciating how blessed we are that there is diversity, because can you imagine how dull this world would be if every single person were the same? I mean, just think about how that would just be almost a waste of time. And so I think God created us with these differences to see how in the world we would adapt to one another, and can we get over the things that stay in front of us that keep us from embracing one another. But the fact of the matter is that beyond those differences, we're all the same. And I've had the privilege of chairing the Habitat for Humanity International Board, so I've gotten a lot of opportunity to travel the world, and it's the same way all over the world. So it's nothing that's unique to the American spirit. This is a universal challenge that we've got to figure out how to get over. And as we build community, we have to keep that in mind. So one of my other big heroes is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he always talked about the work that we engage in as building the beloved community. And what the beloved community is, and it's a simple concept, but you know, it's one of those things where it's easy to talk about, but it's very hard to do, because it forces each and every one of us to put our own kind of personal prejudices aside, so that we're doing the work that needs to be done. And so the beloved community is a community where every single human being has the opportunity for a great quality of life and has the opportunity to tap into their individual, God-given talents so that they can make a contribution to society and to the world. And as members of that coalition, each of us is challenged to do just that. Now, that sounds easy, but really, when you go home this evening, you start thinking about it. And by the way, I'm not preaching, I'm just making some comments and observations. I have these struggles myself. But it is so important that we get out of the way of progress by remembering that each and every human being has value. And if you can do that, then all of a sudden the work that we're talking about doing becomes possible. And I would say that it's our responsibility. I remember I heard a wonderful lecture by Rabbi David Rosen, who's the international director of interreligious affairs, and he said, religious wars and conflicts are seldom about doctrine, but about territory. And so I want you to think about the issues that we fight about as Americans and in our cities, and because everything comes from the bottom up. You start with a community and then the city and the county and so on and so forth. I think all of our tribal and racial and class and cultural barriers have everything to do with territory. And I think we are fearful about whether or not there's going to be enough. Are there enough good communities? Are there enough good schools? Are there enough scarce resources? But guess what, folks? We have been at this now for over, 400 years. And the great news is that there's plenty if we can tap into the unlimited God-given potential of each and every member of society. Because that is our history. We are a country of immigrants, and we are a country of very talented people. And if we can figure out how to create communities of opportunity so that each and everybody can be in the game, the pie will grow rather than shrink. And right now, we're so focused on the pie and who's going to get it, who doesn't get it, do I have to protect it, and so on and so forth, that we are using all of our creative juices in the wrong way. So I want to put out there that we've got to start thinking about all of these issues in a very different way, or we'll end up destroying ourselves. Great nations before America have also gone down in flames because they got focused on the wrong thing. So it's up to us to make these decisions and make the changes that we need to make in order to thrive. And I think that's what we want. I mean, the hell in all of this is that so many of these conflicts are not things that we feel are the right thing. I just think we act so much out of fear. And unfortunately, our political class, too many of our Congress people talk about they promote and inspire fear rather than hopefulness. And so it's really up to each and every one of us as to who we elect as our leaders. And do we want to be about hope, or are we going to worry about a lessening pie? Because I promise you this, you do get what you expect. And so we've really got to step back and think about not just us, but for future generations to come. And what I love about young people is that they are so hopeful and so positive, and all of these things that we struggle with, you would think that we got caught in a time warp somewhere, where the discussions just continue. But the fact of the matter is that the young people, they've moved on. And that is our hope and that is our potential, but we've got to make sure that we're not holding them back as we do our work. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that I did in Atlanta, because I think it's very instructive. And one of the things that we did is that we stayed with the work to make sure that we really understood what in the world is going on here and what is the problem. So the advantage of coming to the work and having little or no background in, the public housing system as it was, is that I really was inspired to come and make a difference because I really cared, and given my history, and given my family history, and growing up in the Jim Crow South and all of that stuff, I said, this is important work, and I want to make sure that families who in Atlanta looked a lot like I looked, I said, I want to make sure they have a shot, because I know that the reason that I've had the opportunities that I've had is because of people who had put their lives on the line to make a difference, not just for themselves, but for the country. So I said, if we're going to do this work, let's do it the right way, so let's understand the problem. And yes, families were trapped in multi-generational poverty. Yes, the properties looked terrible. Yes, the incomes were horribly low. People were surviving on $3,000. Yes, the crime rates were high and so on and so forth. But if you zoom back to the 1990s, almost every major city was struggling with a lot of these issues, because what was happening in the 1980s and 1990s is that there was all of this white flight and middle class flight from cities because people were running away from something. And they thought what they were running away from were other people, when what they were really running away from was a combination of bad policies, history, and that type of thing, because we had just come through a very, I think, sad period of time. But again, everything happens in the context of history and a journey. And so many folks thought, gee, I'm going to run to the suburbs and have a better quality life. And by the way, the more homogeneous the suburbs are, then that will ensure that I'll have a good quality of life. Well, we all know how well that worked out. But that's what was going on. And so that was the 1990s. And so Atlanta, this was in the 1990s, had the highest violent crime rate in America. And each and every one of the public housing projects had multiple times that violent crime rate. And it all had to do with the fact that we had created environments of concentrated poverty. And concentrated poverty victimizes the families who are living in it more than anyone else, but it also has an impact in terms of the surrounding communities. And this was not the fact that the families who lived in these conditions were bad people. They were not. They were victims of the predators of society. Because predators, by the way, are very lazy. They're looking for easy marks. And so that type of situation creates hopelessness, and it also results in disinvestment. We talked about disinvestment a little bit earlier today. Nobody wants to be there because they realize that the predators set up shop there, and so there are no resources, no disposable income, all of those things, and so these areas become blighted and almost abandoned. So when we did the diagnosis and looked at what was really going on, we said, the first thing we must do is end the practice of concentrating poor families. Not apologize for it, explain it, so that the people themselves did not feel that they were being stigmatized, although they were, but they were being stigmatized because of the area of concentrated poverty and not who they were as human beings. So we said, we are going to end this practice because it makes no sense. The government's heavily invested in this, and so how can we change this phenomenon? So we said, we put the marker down, We said we're going to end it, and we said, okay, what does that mean? Well, you know, God always helps out. There was a little program called Hope 6. And, you know, Hope 6 is one of these things where this is really cool because this was the government's, this is a secret, so don't tell anybody. This was the government's first toe in the water to deregulation. And the good news was that there weren't all of these prescriptions in the thing. I remember I went to a conference and Secretary Cisneros said, public housing has failed its mission, and we want to see something different. And Senator Barbara Mikulski, who actually authorized it, and you know, Barbara Mikulski is a fabulous senator, she said, a politician is a social worker with power. That's how she describes herself. And you know, if you follow what she's done over her lifetime, that's how she has done it. But she said, I want this program to transform both the real estate and the people's lives. So Secretary Cisneros said, I'm going to toss the rules. And so I said, wow, this is really fabulous, because we're going to have an opportunity to really do some things. So it wasn't all scripted out where you had to do this, you had to have this and that percentage and this and so on and so forth. Just basically said, make it better, make it work in your locality. So we were very fortunate because we decided, well, if what we want to do is end concentrated poverty, we're going to create what is now, in common parlance, a mixed-use, mixed-income community. And I remember, again, go back to the 1990s, we had one secret weapon that we were able to use that made the difference. And that's because Atlanta had been selected for the Centennial Olympic Games. Now, the thing that the city leaders and politicians get most excited about is that if you have the entire world coming to visit a city, everybody wants everything to look nice. So that was our opportunity. And we used the heck out of it, because when we got started, we brought on a great development team. It was a partnership between a local developer, Egbert Perry, and the Integral Group. Really great guy, great mission-oriented developer. And Richard Barron from St. Louis, also another great guy, mission-oriented. And so we all got together. This was in November 1994. The Olympics were coming in July, I think it was July 19th, 1996. Hard date. Had nothing to do with HUD, anybody. The Olympics were coming, okay? So we said, well, folks, we can't have the entire world coming to see, because the Olympic dormitories were being constructed right across the street from one of our worst housing projects. Right across the street. So all of a sudden, literally transformational decisions that had to be made to create a mixed-use, mixed-income community that did not exist had to be made in a time frame that not only allowed changes to be made, but for buildings to come up out of the ground. And when you think about that kind of decision-making, to have a hard date like the Olympics was fabulous. So with that, and by the way, Techwood Clark Howell was the property that was right across the street from the Olympic dormitories, which, by the way, was also on the National Historic Register. And if you don't know what that means, let me just tell you that that means money and time, because you got to consult and all this, and we went through all of that, but we all got it done and approved by May 1995 in terms of getting the permission to relocate the families and demolish these structures. And we got the approval of the mixed-use, mixed-income community in March 1996. So that gave us all the way until July 1996 to get some buildings up, which happened, and it was fabulous. But what is the mixed-use, mixed-income community? Because I think often people don't understand what that means. It really is about a couple of things. One, we decided that we wanted to leverage the scarce public resources with private investment. We also wanted to empower our private sector development partners to lead the effort because we wanted to tap into real estate market principles. We wanted to build a community that had amenities that would attract market rate families to the community so that it was a community of choice, and that it would be managed seamlessly so that the families who had been trapped in these horrible circumstances would in fact become part of mainstream America. Now, that may not sound important, but let me illustrate to you how important it is. So, when we got there, I talked to hundreds of families, and families would pull me aside. I mean, it was almost like you were living during the era of the Gustavo. And they would say, things are really terrible out here, and we're afraid. I'm afraid about my children getting killed. I have to sleep on the floor, I have to sleep in bathtubs, and so on and so forth. And you think about that, and here are families who are relying on the United States government for a subsidy, okay, so they could afford their housing, and those were the conditions that they were living in, and they were afraid to talk about. This was 1994, okay, very instructive. And so I said to them, well, if you work with us, I promise you we will do the right thing and we can change this, but we've got to work together. But think about the fact, and many of you, I'm sure, are parents, think about every single day, not you get off Saturday and Sunday for the weekend, or you get every other week because you're doing something good or whatever. Every single day you have to think about, is my child gonna get killed today? So this community building stuff is important, and so once we explained to people and they understood that what was needing to be done, all of a sudden everybody got it because they said, you know what? It would be different if it was just one community, but each and every one of the communities, because it concentrated poverty, had created that situation. And so I had police officers saying to me often, oh, you can't go visit the community. Forget, okay, this agency owned this property, and they said, it's so dangerous that and by the way, we don't go there either. Okay? So the point I'm trying to make is that this is America's dilemma and problem, these areas of concentrated poverty. It's extreme in some public housing properties, particularly in major cities. But in these areas that have been abandoned and families, we have families and people with children living in these situations. And so it's really a call upon all of us as human beings to do better about it. And the only way that we can do better about it is that we have to work collaboratively and together in order to make a difference, because these human beings did not choose to be there. They were trapped in these situations. So creating, okay, a different model was so important. So we said, we're not going to put a better management strategy around something like that. or we're not going to fix windows and doors and paint so that people can live in horror in something that's painted with new windows. We said we got to change the whole thing. So the whole notion of creating a mixed income community was about creating a sustainable community design that would run the predators out, okay? And if you didn't have market rate families moving into these properties, you would not have the disposable income that drives all services and all investment, okay? No disposable income, no mixed income community. So this wasn't a euphemism. This was really about working with the private sector developers to support creating a community of choice where people who had resources would elect to be there. So that's why the change was important. So we came up with different financing tools, but letting the private sector do what they could do for the benefit of all. So good news, and I won't belabor it. I was talking to Mercedes. We actually came up with a thing we call the Olympic Legacy Program, you know, because you had to use the Olympics every time you could. We were able to package 5 communities and basically run them through the process right before the Olympics was coming in order to facilitate demolition approval and historic preservation approval and fair housing approval and blah, 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 all the whole, you know, alphabet soup, so that these great communities could be constructed, and we were able to get the approvals through. So that's so important in terms of community design and the reason and the rationale for it and driving toward it. And so here are the other things that we learned and we baked into the model. First of all, it's not just about the housing. Housing is essential, but it is not complete in and of itself. You have to take a holistic approach, because in these areas that have been devastated for decades, there's nothing there generally. There are no, the schools, unfortunately, there was always a captive elementary school inside of each one of these horrible places that only served the families who lived in these conditions, only. And these schools were the worst performing schools in the state. And you might say, aha, that shows that poor children can't learn. That is not the case. It says children who are traumatized, who live in danger of their lives, and who have to sleep on the floor, are so traumatized that they are not prepared when they show up to the school to learn. Now, I know that might shock you. To me, it's common sense. So we said, we've got to get the community design right, because as long as children are living in these types of situations, they will not perform well in school. And guess what? As the families moved during the period of construction using Section 8 vouchers, we saw the performance of kids in school going up. And I'll tell you some wonderful stories about what has happened with some of the school transformation and school performance. But these issues are critically important. Health outcomes. You know, we understand, post-traumatic stress syndrome in the context of veterans going to war. But how about having to sleep on the floor every single night because you're worried about getting killed by some bad guys out there who, by the way, don't live in the community. They just take advantage of the community because they know the police aren't coming in there after them. So, better health outcomes. So all of a sudden, if you talk about holistic community building, you're talking about creating a complete community with the resources that become communities of opportunity where each and every individual can thrive. So that was our guiding star. That was our North Star. We said, we've got to make a difference so that each one of these human beings with unlimited human potential could thrive. And so we had to work in collaboration with the school system in order to make that change. Because guess what? There is not a great community without a great school. Great schools make great communities. And great schools are not about around the margin. Great schools are teaching children to learn, to think, to become the next great leaders. And it has nothing to do with poverty. And the reason why we know that is that each one of our personal stories is a testament to God's ability. And if you think back over history and God's stories that are compiled in the Bible and other places are a testament to what he can do if we humans would ever get out of his way and do the right thing and stop doing all the foolishness that we engage in. So, I mean, they're just testaments all around. And if you just sit and spend time with people and you say, wow, I mean, because it's generally someone coming out of all kinds of incredible circumstances, and you're always sitting there saying, how did that happen? Well, we know how that happened. But you gotta have schools that are attuned to teaching people with that kind of potential. And so if you concentrate poverty in communities, you will concentrate the poverty in the schools, and so you bring the trauma to the school that results from all of this damage. Now, that's not to say that some people in some of these situations aren't behaving badly. That's human nature. But if you create the communities where the support and the standards and expectations stay high and you invest in the people, then these things can be turned around. We've got to have every single human being invested and in the game and making a difference, because that one child that you overlook is probably that next, great humanitarian. I mean, I think about young girl Malala, who, made a very simple statement, but very powerful in very difficult times. And she said, girls must be educated throughout the world. Children must be educated throughout the world. And we need to be figuring out how we put our lives on the line for that to happen. And I would say to you that all people have to have communities where they can thrive and where they can tap into their God-given potential. That is our responsibility. And we're not talking about paying a whole lot of taxes, this and that, and all that, stuff that everybody gets. That's a red herring. We need to work through that. There needs to be an investment made, but done in a way that keeps the outcomes in mind that we want to accomplish. So you gotta have a great school. Great neighborhood schools make the difference. And if our kids are being educated, they will be hopeful and they will contribute. Many of the kids that drop out of school are not being educated and they're bored and on and on and on. And we know these things and we can come together and make a difference, but we've got to be focused on great community building. And other elements, there's nothing wrong with beauty. This is a beautiful symphony hall, no question. When you walk in, you kind of sit up a little bit and make sure that you didn't bring the dust in off the road. You follow what I'm saying? Something about beauty that changes things, beautiful flowers, beautiful music, the kinds of things that are just inspiring. And so you have to bake all of those things into creating great communities. And it can be done, but it has to be done in a way that supports the outcomes that we're all trying to accomplish. So ending concentrated poverty, working with public and private partnerships, and aligning the interests so that the private sector players want to be there and can be there, because, by the way, they have businesses to run, so they got to be able to make sure that they can hit their bottom line goals, and then empowering the public sector to do what they need to do to support the situation and not be all tied up in all kind of regulatory nonsense. Being holistic and connecting the dots. And I want to say something about that. You know, too often, and I think this is not an intended consequence, but it's an unintended consequence. Because the monies flow down from the federal government in stovepipes, most people are thinking, well, I need to be focused on my stovepipe to get my thing done. And by the way, if I talk to the next stovepipe, I may lose some money that I might be after, because after all, I know they're up there fighting like crazy in Washington over this money, so why in the world do I want to collaborate with them? Well, guess what, folks? We're all in this together, and neither stovepipe participant can be successful without the other. And so I know President Obama had started this process of trying to break down the walls between the stovepipes so that education and housing, very important, transportation, health, and so on and so forth. So it's important that we take a holistic approach so that we're creating communities. Those are the communities that will, in fact, thrive and move forward, and they work. And then we've got to invest in human capital. So I think at some point we have to make a decision as people who participate in this whole electoral process. Do we want to invest in our citizens so that they can thrive, or do we want to pay the lowest taxes in the world and watch our country go down in flames? I'm not a big tax and spend person. I'm just saying that there are resources that are needed to make investments so that we can achieve the outcomes that we want. And we need to step back and be thoughtful about it. And if we take those resources and put them to work, it can make a big difference. So one of the things that we did as part of this model is that we said we need to make sure that we're creating communities where children can thrive. So we intentionally talked about the communities being children-centered. Now, you might say, well, gee, that's not all that important, because what in the world does all that mean? It means that the standards and expectations have to be set in a way where children can thrive. So translate, you know, the government comes up with all kinds of, a lot of challenges out there. Early prisoner release reentry program. How many people in the audience think that that's a good idea for a children-centered community? I hear you. But that doesn't mean that that's the right setting. It means that there needs to be a program that is set up to support that type of situation. All I'm saying is that we can't be all things to all people, and we've got to be very clear and thoughtful about how we meet all of these different challenges. The other thing we did is we invested in the families with coaching and counseling about 5 years, because if a family, and particularly the children, have been through a lot of stress and trauma, you've got to deal with that so that families can adjust and be successful in mainstream America. So I'll tell you a couple of stories. We were very fortunate. I was saying to Mercedes, our timing was good. By the end of December 2010, we had taken down all of the housing projects in the city of Atlanta. All of them, because none of them worked. None of them worked. The things I talked about, if I would have been happy to say, oh, well, except for such and such and so, here's the situation. And the families are doing great. And that's really the important thing. I mean, the families are doing great. And I'll tell you a couple of stories. But we partner with private sector development partners, and to date, we've created over 16 mixed-use, mixed-income communities, taking about $300 million of tax dollars and creating in excess of $3 billion of investment and economic impact. And in terms of the kids going to school, we tracked the class that graduated from high school a couple of years ago. They would have been in early childhood learning communities. And those kids are going on to University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, Georgia Tech, and just a little bit of story on Georgia Tech, which is to the immediate north of the old Techwood Clark Howell community, just literally across the street, over the entire 60-plus year history of that property. And Techwood started out as a property developed for white people because it was during segregation, and then it eventually became a community that served primarily black people. Not a single child ever crossed the street to go to Georgia Tech. So one of our goals was, when we created this new community, we wanted it to be a matter of course that if a child wanted to go to Georgia Tech, they could. And so we had several young people who went to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech is partnering with us and provided those children scholarships. And some kids went to Morehouse and Spelman and University of Georgia and this, that, and the other. But the thing that was so impressive about each and every one of those young people is that when we talked with them, we said, well, what do you want to do? Well, you know, they want to do all kind of phenomenal, great things. You know, you can't even think about all of it. But each and every one of them said, and I want to reach back and help another child travel this path so that they can go on to where they want to go so that they can be successful. So that's the power of investment. And it can happen. It takes a lot of work, and it takes time, and it takes intentionality, and it takes the larger community coming together, and it takes vision, and it takes working with anybody who's willing to work with you, because it's that important. So let's flash forward to 2015, because again, everything happens in a context. So here we are today, and the good news, and this is both good and bad, but it creates different challenges. Rather than families running out to the suburbs, we now have families that are moving back to cities. We are now living in the era of urbanization. And this is not, again, just an American phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon. This is happening all over the world. And if you think about it, it makes sense because families realize that they want to be in the center of urban activity, where the jobs are, where they don't have to be stuck in their cars commuting, where the infrastructure is. And let's talk about what infrastructure is. This symphony hall is part of the infrastructure. So you've got the cultural centers, you've got sporting centers, you've got zoos, you've got great parks, you've got sidewalks, streets, lights. I mean, the cities and counties also realize, you know, as much as we have all of these suburbs, we cannot afford to replace the infrastructure that in many cases was abandoned in order to create all of these, little areas outside of the city. So this whole notion of urbanization is very, very real. And so we're now leveraging the infrastructure and investments that have been made. And if we truly embrace that, we can, many public schools were abandoned and being shuttered because they had been left because there was nobody there to enliven and enrich them. So there's an opportunity here. But what has occurred is as people move in, the cost of housing has gone up. And so now affordable housing, which used to be a curse word, is now something that has gained favor because people realize that affordable housing is not about housing very, very poor people. It's really about having a city that accommodates the various families at various points in their life. So for example, you've probably heard the whole term millennials. Well, millennials are those, young people who are just coming out of college and this, that, and the other. And guess what? Many cases, they can't afford to live in the cities because the rents have gotten too high. So the opportunity today is creating housing for the millennials, because guess what? If you're smart as a city, you want those millennials because they are part of the creative class who will be solving tomorrow's problems, and they're involved in technology and the creative arts and this and that. So cities are now thinking, well, gee, affordable housing is part of what's going to make my city a world-class city, and I need to be thinking about, well, how can I create more affordable housing opportunities? And millennials have just exploded because the good news is that we continue to grow as a population in America, and so that's a good thing. And we need to figure it out, and it's an opportunity. The other side of the spectrum is that baby boomers have also exploded, and so we're coming up on retirement age. And so you also want to keep the baby boomers in town, and they want to be in town as they downsize and this, that, and the other. And because they're on fixed incomes, they also need affordable housing. So you now have a group of partners helping you with these issues that can help maybe change the needle at the state legislators or city councils. So all of a sudden, people are thinking very differently about what community looks like. And so now mixed income is no longer a foreign term because people say, you know what? I was out there in that suburban community where everybody paid $300,000, $500,000 and you know what? I was bored to tears. There was nothing out there. I had to get in my car, drive for 20, 30 miles to go in the things that I care about. I want to be able to go to the theater, the symphony, the basketball game, the museums, just go to a beautiful park or walking trail or whatever. And so people want to be out of their cars. They want to walk, and they want to, and I know this is going to shock you because I come from a city that didn't like public transit either. People actually want public transit. Can you believe it? And so if there's some public transit there, it's now an opportunity. And so now you hear people talking about transit-oriented development. It is an asset. So all of a sudden, when you do your mapping of assets, you have a completely different configuration of things that are now seen as assets rather than liabilities. And so it creates the opportunity to change the conversation about affordable housing, and it also creates the opportunity to talk about mixed use, mixed income communities. Density is a good thing because if you're going to leverage your infrastructure, then you have to do things in a way that is going to make the investments that have already been made work for the benefit of the larger community. So the real question that I want to raise with this group is, are we thinking about today's challenges and opportunities with yesterday's solutions or yesterday's thought process? Because if so, it's not going to work. Because keep in mind, if you talk to millennials and baby boomers, for that fact, you know, very different mindsets. And so these, some of this racial baggage and income baggage and all the stuff that we've, you know, packed and cared for and, you know, have a little tribute for somewhere, either in our garage or our basement or wherever, that stuff is becoming passé. Okay, and the question is, can we let go of some of this old stuff, recognizing that it's there? And I'm the last one to say that we are now in a non-racial society, because that's not the case. We haven't gotten there yet, but I'll tell you what. One of the things that Dr. King often talked about is the only way we're going to be able to break down some of these barriers is that we're going to have to live, work, play, and interact with each other. Because it is very easy to demonize someone we don't know or interact with. And as soon as you know people and you embrace them and you understand that they have the same values, they may articulate it in a different way, but they really have the same aspirations, desires, hopes, and dreams that everybody else has, then some of that nonsense will go away. We'll never get there if we stay in our little enclaves and throw darts at each other. Because it's very easy to, you know, say whatever in the heck it is you want to say to about someone who's a stranger. Whereas, if there's someone that you are sharing life with, it makes a big difference. And so we have come a long way, and so we've got to step back and think about these issues in very different ways, because if not, we'll never get there. And so 2015 is a very different conversation. It's still addressing some of the same issues that we have talked about, so let's not, for God's sake, forget the lessons that we've learned and the best practices. Because guess what? If concentrated poverty didn't work in the 1990s, it's not going to work today. It's never worked. And all you have to do is just do a little bit of research, and that is what the research established and shows. There is so much learning out there, but you got to take the time to look at it, and then once you see it, validate it by not ignoring it and trying to buck the tide. So we've got opportunity. People are moving in. The communities are growing. Today's economy, people don't accept this, but the United States has the strongest economy in the world today. It's not perfect. We've got wealth disparity. That's a problem. We've got income disparity. That's the problem. But at least we understand that the economy is coming back, and I think that many of the owners of companies and some of our publicly traded companies, I think if we start having a different dialogue about social responsibility, you know, I think our business model kind of ran amok there, where we said, well, the only thing that we care about is the bottom line. Well, there's more to it than that, so we got to work through that. But the economy is very, very strong. So this is the time when we can do some things today that we couldn't do before. And so I will tell you that I don't know what the neighborhood revitalization plan says here in Dallas, but I can tell you this: it's eminently possible to get it done if we come together as members of the community and the human race and think about creating God's beloved community as opposed to well, I need to have this community with these types of emergency measures so that when somebody who looks different than I do shows up at my doorstep, I'll know whether or not to, shoot them or run, That's not where we're going. So we have opportunity. A lot of great things have happened. I promise you, in 30 years, the conversation will look very different. Because guess what? In 2035, 2040, the minorities in this country will be the majority. And just think about this. If we have not done what we need to do as a society to prepare for that change, then we won't be prepared. So that's why we cannot afford not to educate, embrace, support, nurture every single human being. Our very existence as a great country is at stake. So if we cannot rise above some of the petty things that we debate and get all caught up in, God knows why, then we will never be able to achieve what we can. But I know that we are better than that, and we can do it, and there are wonderful best practices out there, and there's wonderful history, and our own personal stories can help us get there if we can understand them, embrace them, and be focused on building community as opposed to continuing to build these obstacles that get in the way of our individual greatness and our greatness as a country. So I'm going to end my remarks there. Thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Well, what a wonderful and inspiring morning. Lunch is ready, so let's continue these great conversations during lunch, and we'll be hearing from our mayor at lunch. Thank you again to both our speakers this morning. It's so powerful.
Okay, if I can have your attention, please. We're going to go ahead and get started. I would like to take the time to recognize all of our special guests. So if you are here, first of all, I want to recognize our nonprofits. So if you're here representing a nonprofit organization, would you please stand? Thank you for being here. If you are here and you're representing a city outside of the city of Dallas, would you please stand? Thank you. If you are here and you are representing any type of housing authority, would you please stand? And if you are here and you're from the private sector, would you please stand? I want to let you know that each and every one of you is important to our mission and our goal of achieving fair housing for all. Thank you for participating today, and we look forward to future opportunities. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce to you Miss Elizabeth Spencer. Betsy, as she is known, currently serves as Director of the Neighborhood Housing and Community Development Office for the City of Austin. When we think about Austin, we think about how special the city is, and I think at one time you all had a slogan called "Keep Austin Weird," and that may still be something that people know Austin by. Austin is a very unique city within the state of Texas. They tend to be a front runner in doing things maybe a little bit differently than the rest of the state. And for us, for the rest of us, when it comes to housing and community development, that's something that we can all benefit from their example. What Betsy has done in Austin is put into place some very innovative programs that have helped to develop affordable housing for the city. Prior to joining the City of Austin, Betsy was Chief Operating Officer for the San Antonio Alternative Housing Corporation, a nonprofit organization that provides housing and support for low to moderate income communities. She was a member of the team that received the 2009 San Antonio Business Journal Award for Best Residential Development in South Texas, and the first affordable subdivision with cottage development. A proven leader, Betsy has over 20 years of experience managing community development programs in the public and private sector. Would you join me in welcoming today Ms. Betsy Spencer?
Good afternoon. Gosh, thank you so very much. I certainly hope that my presentation is as helpful as it's been presented. I often tell people I'm a recovering social worker. I also used to work for the city of San Antonio a long time ago, and for about 10 years I was a social worker, and I worked in a homeless shelter. And then after that, for about a year, I managed the Fair Housing Office for the city of San Antonio. And then I got the chance to actually develop with a CHODO and now work with the city of Austin. So this is something that I've done really my whole adult career, but I would have to say I'm probably a social worker at heart, which is why housing is such a wonderful job to have, because you really can see the difference that you make in folks' lives. So anyways, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the city of Austin. We don't have it all figured out. We have a lot of the same issues that everybody has here. Traffic, of course, is a huge issue for us in Austin. We are still a small, big town. There's a small town mentality with the desire and want to be, have the big city amenities. But you probably read in the paper, we have a very fast, a rapid growth in our economy. Our property values are increasing very quickly, and in that we're having an increased economic divide. So we have a lot of the same issues that we struggle with every day, but we have had some tools that actually a lot of them were in place before I got to the city of Austin. I've been there 5.5 years. But in that, there's a lot of very educated, committed folks in Austin that started a lot of this stuff, like I said, way before I got there. So we always take a look when we're doing our planning in 3 core areas. Having accurate data I think is very important. We are very data-driven. Austin, I think a lot of that's because of the University of Texas. Is a very well-educated community in some areas. So having accurate data has been an important part of our story and convincing policymakers and the public at large on the value of what we do. Having tools and revenue, obviously we can't do what we do without having, a fair amount of resources. We are fortunate to have some local resources that other communities don't have. Again, that's been because of the general elections that we've had that have created some of these resources. And then regulations and/or tools, policy and tools that help encourage or promote affordable housing. I'll tell you though, one thing that we started about 2 years ago, we very rarely say affordable housing anymore. We say household affordability. And it was interesting when we just reversed those 2 words, that it became a much more impactful story for a lot of folks. Last year, we had a major change in Austin. We went from an at-large district membership. We had 6 at-large council members and 1 mayor. In 2012, there was an election, a proposition, and it created 10 individual districts. So we now have individual district representation and the mayor's at large. So and every single one, I think almost every single one of the individuals who ran for office ran on the platform of household affordability. I would imagine it's a very similar platform that you all would have here in the Dallas area, but between transportation costs, wages are stagnated and our property values are going up drastically, and utility costs, household affordability is something that everyone can understand regardless of where they are in the economic strata. So that's changed our messaging in a lot of ways, and I think it's made it a message that it becomes more real for a lot of folks regardless of how much they make. So anyways, what's next? As I said, we are very data-driven. In 2009, and then again in 2014, we employed a group called BBC Consulting out of Denver to do our housing market study. We do this in concert with our consolidated plan. The HUD requires with our consolidated plan that you have some sort of housing market study. We do a very exhaustive housing market study. Obviously, there's a lot of census data. We were not fortunate. In 2009, we discovered that we had a gap or a need of over 37,000 units of affordable housing for folks at 30% and below. So for us, what that is, tells us there's an awful lot of people living in that very cost-burdened situations. So those are folks, we have folks that are living in Austin, but they're doubled up, tripled up, or spending well more than oftentimes 50% of their income for their housing expense. When we reran the data in 2014, the gap is 48,000. So we have a tremendous need for units that are affordable to individuals so they wouldn't be paying more than 30% of their income. This is incredibly important data because it has helped us tell the story to policymakers and to the general public just how important household affordability is. We also did a tremendous community engagement this last time around. We had a lot of community meetings. We also had a housing choice survey where we got over 5,000 respondents. And that was, the majority of that survey was to find out where do folks want to live. In Austin, there are many folks actually, especially city employees or other big employers, 3/4 of those folks live outside the city limits. So we've had a lot of suburban flight because the value, you can get a much bigger house, you can afford more when you live in the suburbs. So that's a big part of our transportation problem is that 3/4 of the folks who work downtown live outside the city of Austin. So it was important that we survey individuals and families. If you had the choice or the ability to live closer to where you work or downtown, would you make that choice? And overwhelmingly, many folks said that they would actually want to live downtown or closer to work, but there just wasn't any place that they could afford. So that was a very important message that we heard. We know that the need is there and the desire is there for more household affordability in the core downtown area. And we had a lot of different diverse populations. We went to a lot of existing neighborhood associations and other meetings where we could get a diverse group of individuals and folks to respond to the survey. So we use this information to help with our goal setting, and it provides us a level of, I don't say professionalism, but when we have very accurate data, then it helps policymakers make certain decisions. Oh, wait. Maybe I got my slides wrong. Oh, here we go, sorry. I'm not very good at technology. So another tool that we use, back in 2006, we worked with the Kerwin Institute to create opportunity mapping. We revised those maps in 2012. And so if you can see, the darker the color, the higher the opportunities. So the dark brown areas are areas of high opportunity, and when it gets more to the yellow, those are lower opportunity areas. And there's a wide variety of indexes that get laid over, and I'm not a data person, so I'll do my best, but there's a lot of different data sources that the Institute pulls together: crime statistics, education, jobs, employment, income, amenities, transportation, public transportation. All of those layers get added onto this map. And so we utilize this tool. A lot of the funding that we deploy to developers, we do through a scoring application. And we have 3 core criteria that receive a great deal of points in our scoring criteria. One of them is geographic dispersion, or that's code for high opportunity areas, deep affordability, and long-term affordability. And I'll describe those in a little bit. But this is the map that we use. So all developers, when they apply for our funds, one of the things that we will score them on is where the project is located, and the higher the opportunity, the area, the more points they get. Obviously, not everything that we fund is in a high opportunity area. High opportunity area land is going to be very costly. It can be very hard. We have a very hot housing market right now for real estate, so it's very often when property goes on the market, realtors don't even have to list it hardly. It can be within a couple hours and is under contract. Nonprofit developers struggle trying to acquire land quickly. One tool that we're looking at that we have not yet realized is a strike fund. We're trying to put together a preservation strike fund that will allow nonprofit or for-profit developers for easy access to capital, so they can do rapid acquisition, hold the property for about 3 to 5 years till they get their permanent financing together to be able to develop. But that's one of those next step type things that we're working at. Anyways, this is the tool that we utilize to be able to assess the opportunity of the area that we're going to finance a development. The analysis of impediments. If you guys are most of you I'm sure are aware of the analysis of impediments. In Austin, we do it every 5 years in concert with our consolidated plan. And I realize a lot of you are here to hear me talk about the source of income, and the gentleman who made my presentation didn't even put it on here, but I'll talk to you about that. Anyways, we use the same consultant for the housing market study to do our analysis of impediments. Again, we had a tremendous, we work a lot with our stakeholders in the community. Like I told you, I used to work in San Antonio. We didn't have a lot of community engagement. This was a long time ago. We couldn't get folks to our meetings. When I moved to the city of Austin, I couldn't pay people to not come. We are very engaged in the city of Austin. And so we learned quickly we could either fight with the folks that came to our meetings, or we could work with them. So we put individuals on an advisory task force to help us with the analysis of impediments. This is often a very difficult process, right? Because we have to identify our own impediments. Often they are policies that we as a city or government have created, and then we're going to put them in a document for everyone to see. And so that's a hard thing for folks to do sometimes, is to identify your impediments and then what you're going to do about them. But we do have very strong advocates in Austin, and it was a lot more beneficial to have them be a part of the process. They're very well aware of the impediments. They work with them and live with them and fight on us, rightfully so, every day of the week. So having the disability community on the advisory group, having the legal entities that are often going to be are really going to file suit against us, having all those folks on the advisory panel, it made it very real for us as far as what we were able to put in our analysis. For the last 20 years, our analysis of impediments had identified adding source of income as a protected category as a barrier we should achieve. We've tried 3 different times in the city of Austin to include source of income, and it never got any traction. Last year, and I think part of it was because the council was their last year, right? So I told you we just got a brand new council. We have 9 brand new council members and a brand new mayor. So the previous council, I think, really wanted to do something, so they introduced source of income. That was probably in April of last year when they introduced source of income as a protected category to our ordinance. So it took all the way through December. We went from April through December because it had to go on 3 different readings. The apartment association fought us very hard and brought lots of people to testify against source of income, but we equally had as many people come out and speak in favor of source of income and the reason why it was so important. So we were very fortunate that our city council finally approved in December to include source of income as a protected category. The very next day, the apartment association filed a lawsuit against us. I testified at that hearing in January. There was an injunction and all that stuff that goes along with that. We were fortunate in that the judge overturned or ruled in our favor. We were able to keep source of income. There was an appeal that was filed. That too, we won that. We maintained it. But now there is legislation. There is a House bill and a Senate bill that is working to make it illegal to have source of income as a protected category in the state of Texas. So I did testify 2 weeks ago at the Urban Affairs House, it's a representative hearing against that bill, even though the Senate bill actually has a grandfathering clause that Austin would not be, the new rule would be for everybody but Austin, which I think is kind of silly, but I mean, we want that, but we are actively working to oppose that legislation because they are deathly afraid that if Austin gets it, then everyone else will want it, as they should. And so, but just to let you know, the big argument that they utilize or that they use is that it's a mandatory, that having source of income as a protected category translates into mandatory participation in a federal government contract, AKA the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that's terribly onerous. It's desperately onerous to do a housing choice voucher, and the landlords, and they're just going to be treated terribly. And so it's an interesting exercise to go through. When I was a developer, we utilized the housing choice voucher program a great deal. It actually was our bread and butter for a lot of our rental income. Never had any problem with it. It was a tremendous asset to the individuals and families that we rented to, and it helped us maintain our rent. So it is difficult for me to understand how landlords wouldn't want to benefit from the payments and the process. But anyways, that's what's going on. So we are hopeful that we will be able to maintain source of income as a protected category in the city of Austin. It helps towards our geographic dispersion and housing opportunity. We know that if you're familiar with Austin, there's an area, it's the east. There's a crescent sort of, if you go down 35 on the east side, the vast majority of our subsidized housing and our Section 8 voucher program participants reside in the same area. And so the voucher program is one of the best ways for us to be able to have folks live in higher opportunity areas. We have had challenges, though, obviously, because landlords would just put up or say, we just don't take vouchers. So it's been a huge impediment to housing choice in our community. So adding source of income was an exceptionally important action for us to take in an effort to be able to ensure that folks have the best opportunity possible. So we're hoping that it stays. Assessing the growing need. Sorry, I think I messed my slides up. So one of the things that we started, our council last year created what's called a Housing Job Transit Action Team. So obviously it's not enough just to count the houses, and it's important that we place housing as close to the jobs that individuals are going to have. So we've just started really measuring and keeping track of where the jobs are, where the housing exists, and hopefully ultimately marrying the job opportunity with the housing and the transportation. Part of this really was by necessity. We've recently started to apply for FTA funds, the New Starts and Small Starts program. To be eligible for that funding, you've really got to demonstrate marketable results in having your subsidized housing near your transportation and near your jobs. And so obviously we've got tremendous congestion issues in Austin, Texas. And just like I've heard a lot of folks describe this morning, people are traveling long distances to get to work. I'm sure all of you are very aware when you really combine transportation costs with housing costs and utility costs, many of our families are spending 60, 70, 80% of their income just on those things. So if we can reduce the transportation costs, it'll help to increase the quality of life. So this is a new index that we've just also been looking at. And I'm going to do my best to articulate this. This is a new one to me, sort of. So if you look at the star, so this is a proposal where we were going to have a proposed housing development where the star is. And then if you take a look at the dark blue areas, that's where there's jobs, lower income jobs, jobs within the range where folks that would be income eligible for subsidized units would live. And so what we've noticed is that the number of jobs has increased in that area. Back in 2002, there was 7,600 income eligible jobs, for lack of better words. And then in 2011, there was 10,000. So the jobs have increased, but the number of people living in those areas has only increased by 2%. And so we're translating that to mean that there's just not the affordable units close to the jobs that's needed. So again, it's just another way for us to look at the data to be able to demonstrate the need when we're talking to policymakers. So we are very fortunate in Austin, Texas. In 2006, we had a bond election. There was a proposition that allocated $55 million to affordable housing. And I think it was the first time in the state. I know that there are a lot of other areas that do it now, but it was kind of a big deal in 2006 because I think it was the first time in the state, and it was specifically for affordable housing. A lot of times you'll see it married up with economic development and some other initiatives, but this was specific just to affordable housing. And like I told you before, we have three main areas that our core values is deep affordability, long-term affordability, and geographic dispersion. So we define deep affordability for income levels of 30% or 50% AMI. So 99% of the $55 million that was allocated in 2006 has gone to families that are at 50 or 30% AMI. So we target very low income individuals. Long-term affordability, we're looking for a minimum of 40 years. And so some are as long as 99 years, but a minimum of 40 years with a restrictive covenant to ensure that. And then geographic dispersion is we are looking to try to provide housing for all types of people all over the city of Austin. Our three main investment areas are rental housing developer assistance. A lot of people call it rental rehab, a lot of different programs, but that's an application process for gap financing for rental housing development. Often multifamily, but not always. Sometimes it's very small chodos, sometimes it's very large nonprofits, and sometimes it's very large for-profits. But that's our rental housing developer assistance. Spends the majority of the money because 55% of Austinites rent. So we have more people that rent in Austin than who own homes. So it makes sense that more of our money would go to help rental housing. Home ownership housing, with our acquisition and development program, also an application process for gap financing. We help developers who are we help buy the land, put in the infrastructure, and help with the construction cost for home ownership. Habitat for Humanity is a big supporter of the program. And then we have a home repair program. This actually started after the allocation, the 2006 bonds. I don't know if any of you guys use your CDBG for minor home repair. It's brain damage, no offense, but I mean, it's hard to do minor home repair with federal funds. You've got to do the environmental and all that sort of stuff. It can be very tedious for a small amount of funds. So the community got together, and we have a coalition of nonprofits that do, so nonprofits administer all the programs to do minor home repair, mostly for seniors and disabled. Because oftentimes you don't need to do a whole lot of work. When you use home funds, you've got to bring the whole house up to code. And again, with CDBG, it's just a lot, it's administratively very burdensome. So these are local funds that do minor home repair for seniors and the elderly, and it often makes a difference of being able to keep them in their home another 5, 10, 15 years. We have found this program to be very beneficial, and it's also very, it's popular with most folks because it makes sense to a lot of folks. I don't know if you can see this, but this just shows how we were able to, we've spent the whole $55 million. We went through it in 5 years. It was we were very fortunate, and so there wasn't a good reason to not spend the money. So we were able to invest the money pretty quickly. We were able to create or retain almost 1,700 rental units and a little over 900 home ownership units, which includes the Go Repair program, for a total of almost 2,600 affordable units, but a total of 3,400 units total. There was about another 25% of the units that were market rate. So in some of the developments, we had mixed income projects. The general obligation bond funds didn't fund any of the market rate units, but it helped to promote and create those market rate units within an affordable product. A couple things that are very important to know: of the $55 million that we spent, we leveraged over $200 million of private investment, almost 4 to 1. Most bridges and streets and stuff don't leverage a lot of private investment. I always like to tell folks that. This was a huge part of the story for us to tell when we went back for another allocation. So $200 million of private investment were leveraged by the $55 million. There was also an economic analysis, an impact study that was done by a local nonprofit in Austin. They employed a group called Civic Economics to do the economic impact of the $55 million. And they determined that it's very likely over the next 10 years that $55 million will generate $840 million of economic investment to Austin through the job creation and all the goods and services that everyone buys and everything over the next 10 years. So we feel very confident that this investment helps the city as a whole and just the general economy. And that's all part of that data, right? Giving people accurate data helps them to understand the story. So in 2012, there was another proposition for, at that time it was $78 million allocation. It was 2012, presidential election. There were 15 propositions on the ballot that year. Every single proposition passed except the bonds, except the affordable housing bonds. In 2012, we failed. And so it was a huge clarifying moment for a lot of us, because we had felt so successful with the first 55 that we all just assumed that we'd get another allocation. It wouldn't be that hard. A couple things that we learned: we didn't do a lot of community outreach that year. As city employees, we cannot. But the advocates, we have a pretty strong advocate base, hadn't done a whole lot, and our language was relatively generic in the proposition, and it was a hard year, right? We were just coming out of a recession. There was 15 propositions on the ballot. A lot of people just didn't understand. So it failed in 2012. We were fortunate, though. We had several city council members. 2 of them were running for mayor at the time, that spearheaded an initiative to put it back on. There was a lot of criticism to that. There were some folks that felt, since the general election had not passed it in November 2012, that it did not look good to bring it back. The general public had spoken. but they went ahead and they put it forward anyways. The Housing Works advocates put together a very strong campaign, and they did amazing tours of our affordable housing properties in Austin. They did a lot of education. They did a lot of door knocking. They spent a lot of time, because we could not, really advocating, and we were a single proposition on the ballot in 2013, and it passed. So we have $65 million now, and so this just sort of shows you we tend to spend about 70% on the rental, about 20% on the home ownership, and about another 10% on the go repair. And I anticipate, we always have on a capital budget, you have to project out how you're going to spend your money. We always have the flexibility, should the market change, should home ownership suddenly become more, there'd be more deals that would require financing, we have the ability to move the money back and forth across the categories. It's very important when it's real estate, right? We've got to stay with the market. So this is just a projection, but this is what we've got right now. Tools and revenue. So obviously the general obligation bonds is a huge source of revenue and tools. Another initiative that we've got is started really actively in 2009 is permanent supportive housing. And I think here in Dallas, you guys have really got a very strong program with your homeless as well. And so we received we call them homework assignments. We got a resolution in 2009 to go and create 350 units of permanent supportive housing for the city of Austin. We had a need of about 2,000, but it wasn't realistic that we'd get all of that. So dedicated revenue. So what we had was our homeless advocates and door providers now fighting with our regular affordable housing providers and the Go Repair folks. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. We're all challenged with the need is way bigger than we've all got the resources for. One of the tools that was passed 2 years ago, we utilize density bonus programs in Austin because we can't do inclusionary zoning. None of us can do it here in Texas. So we try to utilize density bonus programs. The downtown density bonus program, all of the fees that are generated from that, we have a fee in lieu. You have the option to either create affordable housing on site or you can do a fee in lieu. And so we've had several projects. The council decided 2 years ago that all the fee in lieu from the downtown would go towards our permanent supportive housing initiative. Our homeless shelter is, if you've ever been to Austin, Texas, everyone wants to go to 6th Street because that's where it's all very exciting. Right next door on 7th Street is our homeless shelter. I always find that fascinating that they put the homeless shelter right next to the biggest economic driver downtown. But anyways, we've got our homeless shelter downtown. The downtown businesses are not real thrilled about that because we've got a lot of foot traffic, right? So part of our initiative for the permanent supportive housing is to be able to rapidly rehouse folks and get them in their own unit with the appropriate services for whatever their needs are. So I'm assuming you guys do permanent supportive housing up here. The biggest thing that we've got to start really doing, and we've just started in the last year, is measuring measurable outcomes and the cost savings. And that's the story that we're trying to tell with our permanent supportive housing initiative. If we can demonstrate major reductions to public safety, to medical expenses, many of these individuals are high or frequent users of public systems. And so we're trying desperately to measure the cost effectiveness and or cost savings of providing folks permanent housing with the appropriate support. So obviously it's having the right tools and resources to be able to do that. We also have a housing trust fund. In 2000, I got the right, yes. There was an ordinance passed to where we have a desired development zone downtown. So in the downtown area, properties that were previously off the tax rolls, after they're put back on the tax rolls and developed, 40% of the property taxes that those projects generate come to the Housing Trust Fund for affordable housing. So we're up to about this year we should get about 850,000. We anticipate in the next couple of years that will go up a great deal. There have been several large properties or projects in the downtown area that are going to come online in the next couple of years. So this is just this is dedicated revenue at the local level that is earmarked specifically for affordable housing. Community Land Trust. This is a huge tool. We use it on the multifamily side a lot. We have a finance corporation as a subsidiary of our department, and so on the multifamily side, we'll use it. The finance corporation will hold title to the property, and then we'll do a ground lease with a developer for the improvements. We are now starting to use this model for our single family. We have iOffice on 11th Street, just east of 35. Have you ever been to Franklin's Barbecue? We're right next to Franklin's Barbecue. It's an urban renewal development area, and when we have 7 little houses that were purchased about 15 years ago that we just recently finally developed. Those properties, when they were appraised a few weeks ago, were almost $300,000. They're little 100-year-old, 800 square foot homes, and half of that is the land value. The land is valued as high, if not higher, than the improvements. I can't sell that to anyone who's income eligible. I can't put enough subsidy. I can't put enough home funds. I can't put enough into that. So we've spent the last year trying to find a lender who will lend on the land trust model where we will retain title to the property and they will get a mortgage for the improvements only. We had to find a lender in California. There's a lot of other communities that have utilized the land trust for the last 20 years, but Texas has not. And so we finally found a lender out of California who will lend on improvements only, right? We're a big property rights state, so the lenders here, everyone just feels uncomfortable for some reason lending on improvements only. Now the good news is I can guarantee the security of that mortgage, right? Because I'm going to buy it back. If that homeowner defaults for whatever reason, there's no risk to the lender. I'm going to make sure that everything's okay because I have a vested interest in that property. But the only way that we're going to be able to sell those properties, and so the area that we're talking about is an area that has developed is in such high demand and those property values so high, affordable housing is a big issue for us there. So it's incredibly important that I maintain household affordability for those units. So the only way we can do it is with the land trust because no one of limited means can live in that neighborhood without great subsidy or a land trust model. So if I see you again, I'll report back because I'm still working with the lender trying to get this one worked out. So this is one of our newest tools that we're hoping to use this year. And this just is a picture of how it works. A public entity holds title to the land, does a ground lease on the improvements. They get a mortgage on the improvements only. And then there's a resale formula. When they sell to another income eligible family, there's a resale formula on how much equity. So this is Miller. If any of you guys have been to Austin, you've probably seen the Miller redevelopment. So redevelopment or development of public land is another tremendous tool or asset that we can use. The Miller property was over 700 acres. It was the airport. It was the old airport, and the airport moved, obviously, to the Bergstrom Airport, located off of 71. So the city had 700 plus acres to redevelop. And again, back at this point in time before it started, east of 35 was a very distressed area. No one thought there was a market for development in this area. So the city, along with a lot of community leaders, spent about 10 years on the planning of this effort. A TIF, tax increment financing zone, was created to pay for the improvements, all the infrastructure. We have a master development agreement with they did a national search for a private developer. They've entered into a master development agreement with that organization. City maintains title to the property. The developer takes it down in phases. So it stays off the tax rolls until they're ready to develop. And there is a requirement that 25% of the units be affordable. So that wasn't so hard in the beginning. It's getting harder because, like I said, property values are increasing drastically. The Miller development is an amazing development. There's a lot of beautiful amenities. There's the hospital's there, HEB is there, commercial's there, retail's there. It's turned into a tremendous community. And because the property values are going up so high, they're really struggling. So they're also looking at the land trust model for their affordable projects because it's taken off so well. But it's a wonderful example of how public redevelopment can turn into a very exciting opportunity. This is Colony Park. So we were fortunate. When I came to the organization 5.5 years ago, we owned 200 acres of property on the east side of Austin, kind of far east. So having come from a development organization, when I saw that we owned 200 acres and had been mowing it for 10 years, I couldn't stand the thought of why are we not building on it? And so it didn't make any sense to me at all. When the city had purchased it, probably 10 years prior to that, it was the intent. Number one, it was to stop, there was going to be another mobile home park there, and the neighborhood was very dissatisfied with there being another mobile home park. So the city purchased it to stop that, and then never did anything with it. They had run a pro forma on it being all affordable. 200 acres of entirely affordable housing. Well, that doesn't sound like a very good idea, and the numbers didn't work, and so they just didn't do anything with it, and it sat. So when I got there and I saw that we had 200 acres, I was like, well, surely we need to do something. Well, a couple years ago, HUD had Sustainable Challenge grants. They had planning grants, they had local ones, and they had regional ones. So we went ahead and put in an application for the Sustainable Community Challenge grant. We were very fortunate. We got a $3 million planning grant. And I'm pretty sure that's because we held title to the property. We had site control. I don't think most of the other applicants did not. And it's in a pretty distressed area. It was an underdeveloped area. There had been no investment in this community in probably 30 years. And so I underestimated why they had to put the word challenge in that grant, because I made a huge mistake. I made a fatal flaw. So I've worked for the city for a long time. We put in an application. We didn't ask anybody. We didn't tell the neighborhood. We didn't tell anybody. You have 30 days, you write a big fat grant, you send it in. So we were very excited when we got the award. And the minute we put that news release out, the people were very unhappy with us. There were people in the neighborhood, because we didn't ask anybody. We didn't ask the neighbors if they wanted to be a part of this. We hadn't informed anybody. We thought we were doing everyone a big, huge favor because we were so smart that we had gotten this big grant and how excited we were. They were not happy. They had not been happy with the city government for a very long time. There had been lots of promises that had been made that had not been kept. So they didn't trust anyone in city government. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. And so, but I thought, well, surely they'll figure out this is a good thing. They called HUD, and they threatened to file a civil lawsuit against us because we hadn't communicated very well. So I was surprised at that, but they actually did the right thing. So HUD flew down. I had never experienced that before. HUD flew down, and we all got facilitated, and it took us about a year. It took us about a year to really figure out we had very different communication styles. They were angry, they were upset, they had been ignored, and I'm certain I just looked like little Miss Smarty Pants who came in and thought I was going to fix everything. And it took me a while to shut my mouth and open my ears and hear what people had to say. And the whole project stalled. We didn't spend a dime for 12 months. I got all the letters, we're behind in the whole bit. In the end, it was really 4 people in that neighborhood association who did a tremendous amount of work, and they were never paid, all volunteer. We were getting paid. They didn't get paid a dime. They had recommended for our public engagement that we would utilize the community colleges, the college system. So we had an interlocal agreement with the University of Texas, with the Neighborhood Association, and with ourselves. All three of us signed it for the public engagement, because the public engagement in this community needed to be more than a bunch of computer surveys and pieces of paper. It needed someone to go door to door, right? We had to go door to door. So we had to get the kids. We got the kids at the university, and we got them trained, and they went door to door with the survey to ask people. And we did get a big fancy consultant out of Chicago, but you know who picked them? Was the neighborhood. We did the solicitation the way the city does it, but again, we almost forgot. And at the end of it, the final decision got to be the neighborhood. And they didn't pick the group that scored the highest. They picked the group that scored the second highest. So the council listened to them, and they awarded it to the group that the neighborhood wanted. And so what we learned was the challenge grant challenged us to do things in a different way. And I really underestimated what that meant until we went through that. And those 4 people taught me more in my professional career than most people have. And so we don't issue a memo. And we met weekly. One thing we learned was we had to meet once a week, because if it's that important, then you have to dedicate that much time to it. And when we learned how to talk to each other and listen to each other and meet, and that every decision we made, to include the whole planning, we had a tag team, a technical assistance group that included every single department in the city of Austin, and we invited them to sit on that group. Now, if any of you are city employees, you know how scary that sounds. We had never done that before. I had other departments looking at me like I was crazy, because we had invited folks from the neighborhood to be a part of the whole process. But once everyone got used to that, even my own staff, I had a hard time getting used to. They wanted to whip out memos, and I was like, have you sent it to the neighborhood? And they were like, are you kidding me? No. If we're going to do this, we have to do it all the way. So it was a tremendous learning opportunity for us, and what planning, when you go into someone else's neighborhood and you plan for them, you really need to plan with them. And so I learned what challenge meant. And so we're just wrapping that grant up. We have a beautiful plan. It's a mixed income, mixed use property. We have, our affordability is only 20%. We had put in 40%. Neighborhood let me know that the affordability requirement would be 20%. Again, we have an innovation. We have an innovation district. We have all kind of cool stuff. So we're in the process of putting our financing together. We're hoping to utilize a TIF, just like the Miller model, and so that we can get this project started, hopefully in the next 2 years. That's my very exciting Colony Park story. Rosewood Choice Neighborhood. This is a housing authority. This is, again, publicly owned property. The housing authority got a planning grant from HUD, again, because it's public housing. They have just finished up the planning on this. This also is not far from my office, east side of Austin. This is a very historic. This is one of the first public housing projects in Texas, and it's got some historic features. And so they are hoping to create, just like we are at all the other ones, mixed income, mixed use. And so they're hoping for Choice Neighborhood Award. I don't know if they'll get it or not, but it's just another opportunity to utilize publicly owned land for mixed income projects. Density bonuses. Density bonuses are a big tool for us because, again, we don't have inclusionary zoning in the state of Texas, so we've got to try to incent private developers to build on site. There's no way, even though we have $65 million of general obligation bonds, that's a drop in the bucket for the 48,000 units that we need in Austin. So density bonus programs are a huge way for us to have the private development community create the affordable units at their expense. And I don't know if y'all, I didn't know how these worked before, but when you buy a piece of property, you're a developer, it comes with certain entitlements. So, right, it's zoned a certain way. If they want additional entitlements, then you can provide incentives that way and for community benefits. So it can be affordable housing, can be open space. So a lot of different community benefits that the community can ask in return when you give additional density. That can be in height. You can give additional height. You can give additional floor area ratio. So there's different increased density opportunities that you can provide a developer. I'm not sure, you all, I think, are a lot more comfortable with density in Dallas. Density is still a scary word in Austin, Texas. Like I said, we're a big, small town, so our neighborhoods don't always like increased height. So it's a bit of a struggle for us, but we've got a variety of different density. Oh, did I go too far? No. Here we go. Oh, where's the map? There's the map. So we've got a variety of different density bonus programs that we utilize. So all the different colored dots show you where we've been able to get affordable units through our density bonus programs. The challenge is, though, our density bonus programs are all different. I think that's a personal challenge. As a developer, they like predictability, right? For development, time is money. So if you can be predictable in the tool, it's helpful to them. All of our density bonus programs are different. And so that's a little bit of a challenge. But again, it's been relatively successful, and we're starting to realize these. We, like everyone else, 2008, 2009, the market crashed. We didn't see a lot of development. That's all starting to pick up. So some of the deals that were negotiated several years ago are just now starting to realize units. Make sure I got this right. Okay. So policies are a big part of what has to be aligned to make this helpful as well. I'm not sure what your land development code is like up here in Dallas. In Austin, our land development code is a nightmare. Neighborhoods, there have been a multitude of changes to the land development code over the course of time, and it's been very, very disconnected. There'll be a small change to one part of the code that doesn't translate to another part of the code, and that's happened over the course of about 20 years. And so development can be very cumbersome and timely. So 2 years ago, the City Council approved a consulting team to come and rewrite our code. It's called Code Next. So we have a massive community engagement process that's been going along with that. Again, it's a bit of a fight, because the neighborhoods, we have a very strong, it's called the Austin Neighborhood Council, and they are a very well-organized group of neighborhood associations that fight to maintain the integrity of their neighborhoods, which is fine, but it can be contrary to density and some of the other tools that we need, so it's a constant struggle. We also just recently got is it on here? Got our new comprehensive plan. The city had been operating under an old comprehensive plan for the last 30 years. 2 years ago, the council finally adopted our new Imagine Austin. It's called Imagine Austin. It's our new comprehensive plan. And affordable housing is one of the 8 primary goals. We have our own goal, and so it's exceptionally important for most folks in Austin, Texas, that we create housing for all kind of people in all kind of places and all types of housing. So it's a core value in our comprehensive plan. And part of that is creating the housing opportunities in the activity corridors that have been identified for growth. And then I had mentioned the Housing Job Transit Action Team. So that's an interesting, you've heard a lot of, I think we're all struggling how we can remove silos. So not surprisingly, housing wasn't talking to economic development, it wasn't talking to transportation. We just didn't talk to each other. So the council noticed that. They noticed that we weren't talking, but we all needed the same things in different ways. So they created the Housing Transit Job Group, and it forces us to get together. So it really does force us to figure out how we're actually helping each other a whole lot more. So that's been helpful. Our Permanent Supportive Housing Initiative, we have a leadership committee that meets once a month, and that's all the funders of permanent supportive housing. Again, it was another opportunity when we have to meet every month and keep talking about the struggles that we all have. It forces us to work together. And then we're always working, obviously, on the QAP and trying to influence the 9% tax credits. There is no program that provides more equity, but it's also so incredibly competitive, and it's so difficult. So we're always working towards that. And that's my long presentation. You have questions? And thanks for sticking with me. I know it's awful hard in the afternoon.
Okay, we have time for some questions. I'm going to ask Mercedes if she's coming on stage as well, our consultant. But if you have a question, would you please come to the microphone so that everyone can hear the question? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sue Hounsell. I actually worked in Austin back around 2000. I don't know if this is on.
It's on.
Okay, okay. A couple of questions. One with the bond program, affordability periods. Have you had pushback on 40 years, 99 years is a long time, and is that unique just to the bond funding compared to other programs that you have?
It is unique. When we use federal funds, we usually are just going to, with the home funds, it only requires a 20-year, so we usually try to stick with that. We usually only have pushback when someone comes in the first time. We've got a lot of the same developers that utilize the program, so they're very familiar. At first, sometimes, when we also have a 40-year on our density bonus programs. So yes, at first, folks get a little hinky about a 40-year restrictive covenant, but if you want to use the money, then you have to do it. I've not had anyone not do it, but they've definitely not liked it at first.
In your arrangement with the Colony Development, which is in a TIF and has the 20%, what's the affordability period there?
It will be 40 years.
Okay. And then the other question I had on the density bonuses where you have the payment in lieu, have you found that you've got a certain level where it's not too easy to buy out, but because that's what we've struggled with. We've kind of gotten away from using that.
No, unfortunately, whenever the majority of time, they will take the fee in lieu option. We prefer to have the on-site affordability, and we've just started the conversation about removing the fee in lieu. But right, because we can't, there's only, when in our planned unit developments, we're looking to see when we can remove the fee in lieu, so long as they're getting more, because we can't require it because of we can't do inclusionary zoning. And the hard part is, the fee in lieu never really pays for
a whole,
right.
Yes,
and
exactly.
so whenever we start conversations about increasing that, then the development community comes, unglued on that. And so more times than not, unfortunately, they'll take the fee in lieu option. But we do have, where we're realizing it better, usually is our nonprofit developers who actually come to us for assistance. And if they're fortunate the development also qualifies, then we'll get it there as well.
Okay, so you have both nonprofit and for-profit handling the 20-year affordability?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, at this time, I guess I have one housekeeping announcement, and that is we had some passes for those of you who parked either in the Meyerson garage or the Hall Arts District garage. So if you did not pick up a pass to be able to exit the garage without paying on your way out, please stop by the table to pick up a pass. I want to thank all of you again for coming, and to make the closing remarks, we're going to ask our thought leader and consultant, Mercedes Marquez, to come and make some closing comments. She is going to continue to work with us on the Neighborhood Plus. I want to thank Betsy again for the outstanding presentation. It was more than what we expected. It was even greater, and so thank you, and we'll continue to look to Austin, to the great leadership and things that you all are doing down there. So thank you. Give her, please, another round of applause. And Mercedes, would you come at this time to wrap things up?
I've been asked to thank you all and wish everyone well traveling home with all the weather that's happening. I want to first thank Beverly Davis. You have done a fabulous job putting this together. I feel as though today we at least have earned a certificate in the building of justice, right? Because what I love about today's agenda is that we weren't just talking about what we have to do, although we've been inspired by everyone who spoke today, but actually how you get it in the ground and how you build justice. We have been challenged both to talk about, I'll use Betsy's term, geographic dispersion, as we talk about how you move folks to opportunity that has already been created in any number of ways. And let's be frank, often that opportunity was built at to the detriment to other communities, right? So opportunity built by a legacy, not always of the best policies. But there we are, moving folks to get them to that opportunity. But also what I would call, in the work that Renee has done and that Betsy talked about with the community in Oak Park, one, I want to say to Renee, for years you have been a teacher from afar. And it is a pleasure to be able to spend time with you today after so many years. To listen, that 20-year history is a legacy of justice for our country, of how you build justice. So Renee, I would say this to you in Spanish, felicidades, congratulations. Thank you so much for being with us today. I've known Betsy for a while as well, and if anyone lives Barbara Mikulski's views of a politician as a social worker with power, Betsy and the folks in Austin represent the best of what is it that only the government can do. It's a whole lot. So thank you so much for your example and your expertise for so many years. In Dallas, we face both struggles. How to successfully move folks to opportunity in the northern and the western part of the city. But I want to say something to you. When I started to work with the city of Dallas and we started to look at the maps of Dallas over time, it became very clear that what people thought that Dallas was now the past. The city attorney tells a story as how they went forward to work on redistricting in the last round. They had to move all around like pretzels because they could no longer find a clear path to ensure a people of color district. That's how much Dallas has changed, even South Dallas. Yet, we still have an enormous problem, enormous injustice in South Dallas. At every level, whether it's housing or it's education or it's health care, or the combination of understanding how our public housing residents work with rest. And you know what? People that are living in privately owned housing that have no money for repairs aren't functionally in any better situation than those that are living in public housing. So we've got a lot of work to do. For me, I call that investing for market readiness. The mayor's comments, he spoke about, did you hear him say that he was taking a group of 15 private developers to South Dallas who want to work there? That means they've already done the studies, right? This is like when Starbucks arrives, right? They've already done the work. They already know that value is there. Why? Because the infrastructure that everyone has spoken about, particularly the transportation system, has already been built. So the value is already there, just waiting to be harvested. What is our challenge here in Dallas in making sure as that goes forward, we start to think the horizon further away than what we face today. I'm working in a neighborhood in San Francisco, the Mission District. Has anybody been to San Francisco? Anybody been to the Mission District, the historically Latino neighborhood in the city? I'm from there. Today, if you make less than $75,000 a year of family income, you can no longer live in the Mission District. Latino families, their median income is $49,000 a year. So the Mission is now the most gentrified neighborhood in the country. and Latinos are being forced out, forced out, forced out, forced out. There's a study that came out recently from Harvard that shows that once a neighborhood is gentrified and it becomes now a majority Anglo neighborhood, it never returns to diversity. So amazingly, part of our struggle here will be to not only think about what justice is today, but to think about how we're going to preserve opportunities in the future as the market potential is realized in the way that Austin is now facing. We're going to actually face that here in Dallas, even if it doesn't look like it yet. So then, the umbrella of regionalization. It is possible for us to do an analysis of what all of our needs are. I thought Renee did it incredibly well when she spoke about all the needs faced in those neighborhoods and the opportunity of the Olympics. Right? When I work with folks, my feeling about this is that innovation is the cross-section between need and opportunity. You need both. We have a lot of that in Dallas, even if we don't recognize it yet. And we have a lot of it among the city of Dallas and all of the neighboring cities, whether it's the transportation opportunities, whether it's all the different needs we have. There are many things that we could now begin to build strength. It is difficult because the dollars all come down, right, in those geographic, political realities. So difficult for a politician to say, I need to deliver to my constituents today. What are you talking about 15 years from now? But if we're actually going to work on behalf of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, we have to think a little bit broader about what the needs are that we share, and to think about what it is as a region that only we can do. The next phase of this conversation is going to be a call from the city of Dallas, as the mayor said today, inviting other mayors and other folks in city government to come together to start to talk about that. I am hoping that after you've seen today some marvelous examples of what it is only a government can do, that you will implore your officials, all those great city workers and elected officials, to come join the next phase of the conversation. Blessings to you all. Be careful as you go home. Thank you so very much for coming today.